Good evening. I would like to call the January 10th meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education to order. And I would like to first of all say Happy New Year to everyone. Hope you had a great holiday. I would also like to welcome our newly elected board members, Mr. Benjamin Geese. Ben, if you'd raise your hand, please. Dr. Chris Kolb and Mr. Chris Brady. If we could give them a round of applause, please. Prior to our meeting tonight, we had two work sessions. The 4 o'clock work session was on the draft budget for the fiscal year 2017-18, and our next work session was on ensuring safe schools. No action was taken at either of these sessions. Before we go on with the agenda, there are a couple of remarks that I wanted to make. Everyone that knows me knows I don't talk long. But last week I had the opportunity to see First Lady Michelle Obama give a speech to honor the 2017 Counselor of the Year. So I listened to her remarks and I reflected on what we do here in the Jefferson County Public Schools. The counselor was a counselor from a career and tech center, something dear to my heart, in Michigan. While listening to her remarks, I thought about our work at JCPS and wanted to share some of the thoughts. We should celebrate all things education. One of the things that has happened under the current administration is something called College Signing Day, which we do in Louisville, Kentucky. High school graduation rates have gone up. Students who talk to a counselor are 3 times more likely to apply to college and 7 times more likely to apply for financial aid. In the process of selecting the Counselor of the Year, they interviewed one of the students, and her name was Kyra. She said her counselor helped her to grow to love herself. She held my hand during the hardest times, and she sees promise in everything I do. She came early and she stayed late, and she let her students know that they matter. Other thoughts that First Lady Obama shared was that all students, all youth, everyone should know that this country belongs to all young people. All young people. And the infusion of our cultures makes us great. Also, if you start with a little, hard work plus education makes everything work. All things are possible. The glorious diversity among us makes us who we are. It is not a threat. Do not ever let anyone make you feel like you do not matter. To our youth, you must do your part. You must be prepared, be informed and engaged, and get the best education possible and express yourself clearly. When you're struggling and thinking of giving up, think of the power of hope. Hope is the word that I use a lot because I believe in it. Young people and we as individuals should believe in ourselves. We should know that we, young people and my age, we all matter. We belong. Do not be afraid, and to empower yourself with education. I ask that we continue to lift up our young people, making access and opportunity available to all. Thank you. Now, we will move on now with our moment of silence. We have a lot to be thankful for, so if we would just take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. If we would all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Next on our agenda is a very important opportunity for us tonight, and that is the opportunity to administer the oath of office to our newly elected members. And we are honored tonight to have appellate court Judge Denise Clayton. Judge Clayton, if you would come forward, if our newly elected members would go forth, she will do the pledge, the oath at this time. And after the oath is taken, we're going to take a brief break so everybody can get their pictures. So don't panic.
Sure. You just stand up. You can all be sworn in together. So. All right. And if you would all three raise your right hands. And also, I'm going to read this oath. I'm not going to make you repeat it verbatim. So at the end of the oath, if you would just acknowledge that you do so swear or affirm. All right. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth, and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as I continue a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully execute to the best of my ability the office of member of the Jefferson County Board of Education according to law. And I do further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, I, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within this state, nor out of it, nor have I sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have I acted as a second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending, so help me God. I do so swear. Thank you. Congratulations.
A special thank you to Judge Clayton. If we could give her a round of applause, please, for being here tonight. We're going to take a brief break for all pictures. So family, friends that want to come up and take pictures of our newly elected board members, please do so. It will be brief. This is not a 5 minutes, quick. Come forth, take pictures, please.
We got ours already. Yeah, no, I don't. Okay.
At this time, we will allow a few minutes for our newly elected board members to make any comments that they may would like to have at this time. So, Mr. Geese, would you like to start with comments, please?
Yes, I would like to begin this evening with the recognition of my family, which I had the great honor of standing next to me up here. Abraham Lincoln once said that all that he is because of his mother. And so I would like to recognize my mother, Sheila Geese. She was holding my family's Bible as I took the oath to serve the citizens, the students, the teachers, all who make Jefferson County Public Schools what they are. A little note about the Bible and why it's so important to me. This particular one was carried by my great-grandfather, Elias Ward Blair, in the First World War. And so it has a very special place in my family and in my heart, and I intend to protect, preserve, and defend the very principles that he did so in the First World War, serving as my small role as a public servant here on the Jefferson County Public School Board. Thank you to all who supported me, past and present. Several of my former Jefferson County Public School teachers are in the room. Never doubt that a public school kid can't do great things. Thank you.
Dr. Kolb and then Mr. Brady.
Excuse me. Likewise, I want to thank my family. The campaign was not easy. It was a tough one, and without my family, there's absolutely no way that I would have won. That means especially my wife and my 2 kids, but also my father, my mother, Jesse, nieces and nephews, my sister Kate, who is holding a newborn over there, who you may have heard earlier, knocked on doors while she was 9+ months pregnant for me. And that may have been the most effort that somebody put forth, but there were roughly 50 or 60 people that took it upon themselves to get involved in the campaign and sacrifice, and I really can't thank you enough. It really it gave me some hope in the possibility of democracy. And I want to say thank you to the voters of District 2, with whom I had thousands of conversations throughout August, September, October, and the beginning of November. I won't say that I remember all of them, but I remember most of them, and I will do my absolute best to represent your best interests on this school board. Thank you.
I too would like to recognize my family, my wife Deanna, my 2 sons David, who is taking pictures over here, and Nathan, who briefly stood up, my niece Avery, as well as my sister-in-law Angela, all of which I would not be able to serve without them. Many times when my wife is out of town on business and it's a Tuesday and I'm here, Angela is watching our boys, and sometimes when I'm away at trainings, she's also sometimes tasked with having to watch my boys. You know, there's a lot of folks that helped out with the campaign. I want to say thank you to all of those. I know that some of you are in this audience right now, so thank you very much for all the time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears that were expended on the campaign, and I am truly grateful for your help and assistance. I'm always a little amazed that I'm up here. Because growing up, I'm a child of divorce. I'm a latchkey kid. I'm a son of a single mom. Statistically, as I said 4 years ago, I shouldn't be here. But I had a secret weapon for me, and as I said 4 years ago, that was my mom. She was able to be with us earlier when I had to do the official swearing in by state law. But she has since said, it's too cold here and I'm going down to Florida. So, and made me very jealous. So, and of course, the moment she left is when our temperature went down. So, so thanks, Mom. But, you know, I very often I talk to folks about the importance of public education, and it really kind of comes down to this kind of simple example. I asked them to say, well, you know, when you first started working, you know, when you're a teenager, you know, when you're in college, who was the manager that you worked for? What was their name? And very often it's, you know, they might know, but very often it's, oh gosh, you know, it's been so long ago, especially if you're my age, and I don't recall. Well, who's your first grade teacher? Or your second grade teacher? Or your, you know, 6th, 10th, 12th grade teacher? Oh, they know that. And that goes to the importance of the role that our teachers and our educators and everyone that supports them plays here in our community and to each of our lives. And I am eternally grateful for that. There's one gentleman here that is a teacher over at Eastern High School who, without him, I would not have met my wife. There is my best friend since I've known since sixth grade, who is a counselor at one of our elementary schools. There is my wife's roommate who works in our IT department, and my college roommate who also works in our IT department here. So the amount of folks that, that are in JCPS and how, I mean, everyone in the county knows someone, but it's just, it always, I didn't realize how many ties I had to this organization until I actually contemplated running for office here. And it's just an incredible amount of dedication and devotion that all of you all share toward our kids. So I just want to say thank you for all that, and thank you very much.
At this point, every January, the board is required to establish the organization of our board by electing our new leadership. So this organizational meeting of the Board of Education of Jefferson County is convened in accordance with KRS 160.160, which requires boards of education to elect a chairman and a vice chairman for terms fixed by the board not to exceed 2 years. Board policy BCA requires that this be done annually at the first regularly scheduled board meeting held in January. Therefore, the officers so elected shall serve a 1-year term or until their successors are elected and duly qualified. I will read through what I have to do, and then we'll go back to number 1. The first thing I will do is call for nominations from the board for chairperson to serve a 1-year term. After all the nominations have been made, I will close the nominations. Then I will call for a vote on the candidate nominated by a show of hands. The votes will be taken in the order in which the candidates were nominated. At the conclusion of the voting, I will declare, assuming a candidate has the majority, the individual receiving the largest number of votes to be elected chairperson. The newly elected chairperson shall similarly conduct the election of vice chairperson. So going back to number 1, at this time I call for nominations for the chair of the Jefferson County Board of Education. Ms. Duncan?
I nominate Chris Brady.
All right, is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, Mr. Geese, all those in the nomination is for Chris Brady to be chairperson, and we have a second. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. The vote is unanimous. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Mr. Chris Brady. You are our new chair. Got something for you.
Thank you. Okay, which end do I use here? No. All right, so we will go through this process once again for nominations for the vice chair, and then I'll have some comments after that. So, in accordance with the same rules of what we just, Vice Chair Porter just read, I'm going to call for nominations for the office of vice chairperson, then I will close nominations. Then we will call for a vote on the candidates nominated, and then we will declare that individual receiving the largest number of votes to be elected vice chairperson. So with that being said, I call for nominations for the office of vice chairperson. Member Horn?
I nominate Dr. Lisa Wilner for vice chair.
Is there a second?
I second the nomination.
Are there any other nominations? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? It is unanimous. Congratulations, Dr. Wilner, on being vice chair. All right, well, first of all, let me express my appreciation to my fellow board members for your support in electing me your chairperson. I want to take a moment and thank our former chairperson, David Jones Jr., as well as our former board member, Chuck Hadaway, for their service. Additionally, I would also like to thank our vice chairperson, former vice chairperson. I might have to get used to that. Diane Porter for her continuing service to our students and community, and for her having to break in yet another new chairperson. There's been a lot of discussion regarding consensus in education locally lately. There's a school of thought that sees deliberative discussion and disagreement as dysfunction and inefficiency. I don't subscribe to that point of view. As elected representatives, it is our duty to advocate for our students and constituency. In my view, the best way for the public to understand what we are doing is to see how we come to our decisions. That means open discussion. That means asking tough questions. That means using your voice. And sometimes that means playing devil's advocate. When you see disagreement, don't think dysfunction. Realize this is how we hear the unique insights and opinions each of us brings to the board and how we learn from each other. We live in unsettling times. This district will see changes in the year ahead. Know that this board will continue to keep the focus on students, on achievement, and on realizing the vision, or our Vision 2020 strategic plan. Where we go, so goes the city, and to a large extent the state, it has often been said. And we also know that time isn't always on our side, especially when it comes to achievement. But each of us is up to the challenges ahead. We realize our job will never be complete, and there will always be more to do and more to learn. You know, as I think back about this board and my service on it, I realize that being a part of this board and being a part of this district as well is a lot like being a parent. It's tough. Mistakes will be made. It takes a lot of work and dedication. But in the end, it's worth it. And why we do it always comes from a place of love. And that is a love of our children, not just our own, but of our students. Being a part of this board has been an honor and a privilege, and I hope to give you my fullest measure in this position as chairperson. And I want to try and be brief and just close by saying that as a JCPS parent myself, I want to thank all the women and men in this district for your devotion to our children. And with that, we're going to go ahead. I'll close, and we'll continue the meeting. All right? All right. So next up is our recognitions. If I can have Ms. Terry Robinson come up and talk to us about our recognitions then. I'm sorry? Oh, see, I already messed it up. My very first thing on the board. That's another thing you're going to learn about me. I'm going to learn by messing up. That's unfortunately the best way I learn. I'm sorry. Well, Ms. Horn, Member Horn, please read our vision statement. Thank you.
All Jefferson County Public School students graduate prepared, empowered, and inspired to reach their full potential and contribute as thoughtful, responsible citizens of our diverse, shared world.
And now we'll turn it over to Ms. Terry Robinson for our recognitions and resolutions.
Dr. Hargens, Board Chair Chris Brady, and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education. This evening, we begin with a video highlighting our 31 district schools who have earned the designation of distinguished from the 2016 K-Prep testing. Angie, please do us the honor of playing the video of our distinguished schools.
I love the way that the schools are now. They're more focused on being college and career ready, especially JCPS.
It's been really rewarding to see students who are a little bit afraid to read or afraid to read to an adult, or sometimes students that struggle and may make mistakes when they read. They don't have that same fear when they're reading to a dog.
Thank you for making my job awesome.
You're welcome.
Good morning. Good morning.
Leadership, learning how to make good decisions, having integrity, just learning how to be a well-rounded individual.
So I asked myself, why not take this next step? Why not make a difference?
I think it's important to be at school every day because if you can't like come to school every day, then how are you gonna learn?
Thank you. Dr. Hargan stated the results for our district show a number of important accomplishments that align with the district's Vision 2020 strategic plan. Those strategic priorities include an emphasis on reading proficiency, increasing college and career readiness, providing quality educational opportunities to all students at all JCPS schools, and raising the graduation rate. Those priorities have translated into increased scores in many of those areas. Board Member Diane Porter and Assistant Superintendents Dr. Paige Hartstern, Joe Leffert, and Brad Weston, please come forward to congratulate the schools in Board District 1. Shervita West, Principal of Brandeis Elementary, Brian Garrett, Assistant Principal of Brown School, Jamie Wyman, Principal of Carter Traditional School, Jerry Mays, Principal of DuPont Manual High, Vanita Bimbo, Principal of Academy at Shawnee Middle. Board Member Dr. Chris Kolb and Assistant Superintendents Michelle Dillard, Dr. Paige Hartstern, and Joe Leffert, please come forward to extend congratulations to schools in Board District 2, Jack Jacobs, Principal of Bloom Elementary, Deborah Rivera, Principal of Field Elementary, Carla Davis, Principal of Great House Chirac Traditional Elementary, Scotty Collier, Principal of St. Matthews Elementary, Terry Reed, Principal of Jefferson County Traditional Middle, Richard Giddy, Principal of Atherton High School. Board Member Stephanie Horn and Assistant Superintendents Dr. Glenn Beatty, Joe Leffert, and Dr. Paige Hartstern, please come forward to congratulate the schools in Board District 3. Debbie Blakely, Assistant Principal of Bowen Elementary, Tony Mitchell, Assistant Principal of Dunn Elementary, Sherry Barnett, Principal of Height Elementary, Austin Allen, Principal of Lowe Elementary, Bill Perkins, Principal of Wilder Elementary, Ken Stites, Principal of Norton Elementary, and Dr. Stacy Edelman, Principal of Ballard High School, and Lana Kalin, Principal of Eastern High. Board Member Benjamin Geese and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Glenn Beatty, please come forward and congratulate the schools in Board District 4. Julie Cummings, Principal of Eisenhower Elementary. Phil Poor, Principal of Schaffner Traditional, excuse me. Board Member Linda Duncan and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Paige Hartstern, please come forward to extend congratulations to the school in Board District 5, Michelle Yates, Principal of Lockoff Elementary. Board Vice Chair, Dr. Lisa Wilner, and Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Paige Hartstern, please come forward to congratulate the schools in Board District 6, Tiffany Marshall, Principal of Audubon Traditional Elementary. Board Chair Chris Brady and Assistant Superintendents Michelle Dillard and Dr. Glenn Beatty, please come forward to extend congratulations to the schools in Board District 7, Alicia Dunn, Principal of Bates Elementary, Dr. Shannon Conlon, Principal of Farmer Elementary, Dr. Bridget Owens, Principal of Stouffer Elementary, Rachel Works, Assistant Principal of Tully Elementary, Carol Ferry, Principal of Watterson Elementary, and Penny Espinosa, Principal of Wheeler Elementary. Dr. Hargens and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this concludes our recognitions for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson, and thank you to all of our principals of our distinguished schools and to the staffs that make everything possible. Thank you so much. We on the board surely appreciate everything you do. And also thanks to the Communications Department for that really nice video to introduce all these schools. At this time, it is our traditional custom that we take a moment and let those kids, namely mine, take a moment for everyone to go home if they would so choose to do so they can do homework and take care of all the other stuff. So we're going to take a couple-minute break, and then we do appreciate that. So thank you.
Does it say that on the list?
For them, it really,
Oh, okay.
it's like
I just want to have the ability
Take a picture of the two of you guys. Give me a second.
Oh.
While we have a moment. Thank you.
All right, we're going to call ourselves back to order. Before we move on, we need to make a motion to receive the recognitions. So I need a motion to receive the recognitions. Member Porter makes a motion. Is there a second? Dr. Wilner seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
It is unanimous. Motion passes. All right. Next item up on our agenda is the approval of the meeting agenda. Before we begin, I would like to make a motion, or first of all, is there any discussion regarding this item? I do want to have a bit of discussion on this. I'd like to make a motion that, and let me go ahead and bring this up so I get this correct, that the board would suspend policy 01.41 on the meeting agenda regarding media organization of the board, regarding commitment to abide by meeting policies and procedures. And this particular piece of policy that I'm referencing is where board members have to sign a agreement that, or not have to sign, but they're asked to sign an agreement to conform to board policy or board policies. I think that the board, and at least I know 3 members of the board, just made a commitment and an oath to this office. I don't think another one is really necessary or needed. Is there a motion to suspend this one policy item? This is policy, it's in policy 01.41, and it's under organizational meetings, and it's to commitment to abide by meeting policies and procedures. I can read it if you would like. Does anyone need, I can read this if you all want to understand what this is. Yes?
Yes,
okay.
please read it.
So at the board's organizational meeting, at the first regular meeting in January, each board member will be asked to sign a written commitment to abide by the procedures and practices for the conduct of board meetings established in board policy. If the board chairperson determines that a request or comment made by a board member during a meeting of the board goes outside the established procedures and practices, he or she shall thank the board member for their request or commitment and confirm their concern is valid, express that the request or commitment falls outside the agreed upon board policy for the conduct of the board meeting, cite the specific board policy, and ask board member to follow up on their request or comment using the agreed upon channels. The board will take no action on the request or comment during the meeting. If a board member continues to disregard board policy for the conduct of board meetings, the board chairperson shall address the matter with the board member. This is not something that I really feel that is my role as a board chairperson. I think that we have traditionally abided by these rules in and of themselves, but I don't want to put anyone in a position to have to sign an agreement because I think the oath that we take for office is enough.
I make that motion.
I have a motion from Member Duncan. Is there a second? I have a motion from Member Horn. All those in favor? All those opposed? So, is there abstain?
I'm in favor.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? So was that unanimous? Was that unanimous? So it's unanimous. Motion passes. All right. So now I need a motion for the meeting agenda. Is there a motion for the
Chairman
meeting?
Brady, I would like to make a motion to amend the agenda.
Yes.
I would like to take meeting item number 12, hearing from our citizens, and I would like to place that ahead of our action items.
Okay. A point of information on this. I have submitted to the superintendent as a matter of policy to amend our speaker policy in the future. Since it's board policy, I'm trying to go through our established board policies, that there being a first reading and then a second reading to provide or to give our public a chance for comment on that. At our next meeting, hopefully, I would believe, because I'll be involved with creating that agenda, we're going to have our first reading for that item, and you will get a sense of what my suggestions are on that, and then the board can come to a consensus as to what we really want to do to change that. So I'm open to moving this at this time if we wish to do so. However, just know that this is something that's a policy that I'm in the process of trying to get amended as it is. So we do have a motion that's on the floor. Is there a second? Member Duncan seconds. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. I would love to tell you that if I know. So let me. Currently, we have 4 people wishing to speak to the board, so, which is kind of close to what my policy was going to suggest anyway.
What should be our policy?
That's all right. I'm so sorry. You're absolutely right. See, I'm going to learn this. This is why I need you up here. So, it's as I said. Are we ready to vote? Is there any other discussion? So all those in favor of the motion that's on the floor to move item number 12 up to this point of the agenda, vote by raising your hand. All those opposed? And it is unanimous. Motion passes. So now what we will do is I will have to adjust my outline here that I'm trying to go through. And we will move. You want to move that up to the very next item, is that correct?
Yes, immediately before our action items.
Before the action items, but after the superintendent's report?
Yes.
Okay, so so we still have yet to approve our meeting agenda, so I need a motion to approve our meeting agenda. So as amended, motion by Dr. Wilner. Is there a second? Second by Member Duncan. All those in favor? All opposed? It's unanimous. Motion passes. All right. Now we're on to the approval of minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting? Member Duncan moves. Second. Member Porter seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. It is unanimous. All right. So now we're on to our next point of the agenda, and that is the superintendent's report. Dr. Hargens, if you would take it from here.
Thank you, Chair Brady, members of the board, and thank you for the opportunity to present the superintendent's report. Happy 2017, and welcome to the first board meeting of the new calendar year. Turning the page on a new calendar year is always a time for reflection and refocus in a school district, because it marks the time when students and staff hit the halfway mark of the school year. This is a time to focus on what has worked in the classroom and district during the first semester and how we can collectively improve student learning and inspire our staff in the upcoming semester so we can finish this school year strong. We all must stay focused. Can you advance that, Angie? On Vision 2020 and making it real and alive in our buildings and classrooms. We must all be accountable in our ownership and engagement in transforming a school system that has worked well for some students to a system that works well for every student. I see Vision 2020 on my school visits. Kudos to the students and staff at Height Elementary. I saw personalized learning there that incorporated student choice. Oaths of office today were administered to Mr. Brady, Mr. Geese, and Dr. Kolb. Congratulations to all of you, and thanks to JCPS alum, Judge Clayton, for administering that oath of office. Congratulations, Chair Brady, and congratulations, Vice Chair Wilner. And congratulations to our principals, teachers, and students of the 31 distinguished schools that were recognized tonight. CBO Hudson and CFO Harden presented the board the draft of the draft budget, which is a report of estimated revenues and expenditures for 17-18. This is merely a starting point in the budget process. It shows the initial status before changes are made through decisions in the budget process. The draft budget is not submitted to the state, At the next board meeting, the board will be asked to approve the allocations. That decision will be incorporated into the budget. This is a long process with a scheduled update in March before we ask the board for approval in May of the tentative budget. Safety of our students and employees is our top priority. Dr. Razor provided an overview of safety procedures and protocols with recommendations for continuous improvement. The board approved a legislative agenda on December 13th based on feedback from the board and review of documents, and per the request of the board tonight will be discussing and approving a legislative position on charter schools. Dr. Razor will explain the list that was reviewed by KDE in December that is submitted again as a draft to KDE for a review of all the district facility needs. And JCPS became a district of innovation in 2013. We have collaborated with KDE and other districts of innovation for the past several years. In fall of 2016, we were asked to update our plans through a process. KDE, of course, was impressed with Vision 2020. We're going to do an overview tonight, and we'll request approval at the next meeting. I'd like to point out, Chair Brady, some things on the consent calendar. Agenda item 9.0.1, approval of a cooperative purchasing agreement with Fayette Public Schools. Entering into a formal agreement with Fayette County Public Schools satisfies the model procurement code requirement and will allow the districts together to explore cooperative bidding and purchasing when such is deemed to be in the best interest of both boards. Combining the purchasing power of the two largest districts in the state may prove to provide a savings of financial resources to both districts. JCPS currently participates in the Partnership for a Green City with Louisville Metro, Airport Authority, MSD, LWC, TARC, and U of L. Purchases in those cooperative agreements include copier paper, solid waste disposal service, and single stream recycling service. Also, JCPS is a member of the Kentucky Purchasing Cooperative and currently purchases library supplies, bleachers and installation, playground equipment, scoreboards, cafeteria furniture, and small wear items from our co-op bids. JCPS really benefits from the combined purchasing power. Model procurement law requires us to have these agreements if we are going to purchase off another entity's bid. By having these co-op agreements, we're able to purchase based on the lower price, which due to the higher combined purchase volume would be lower than we could obtain from our own individual bid. Thanks to Mr. and Mrs. Huff, who created a trust in 1999 for scholarships for JCPS students. Mr. Huff's first wife, Evangeline Huff, was a teacher in Jefferson County many years ago until her premature death. Mr. Huff received Evangeline's pension, which he and his second wife, Ruth, benefited from during their nearly 50 years of marriage. To honor Evangeline's time as an educator, Alan and Ruth felt their entire estate should go to benefit students graduating from Jefferson County high schools. The agreement on the consent agenda is to consent for the principal of the trust to be paid to the Jefferson County Public Education Foundation, which will use the net income for scholarships according to the terms of the trust. Also on the consent agenda is a request to rename Moore Traditional School and to delete traditional from the school name, since Moore is not a traditional school in our magnet program. The school's name will be Marion C. Moore School. Moore High School opened in 1969 and was named for Miss Marion C. Moore, one of the 4 original counselors in Jefferson County Public Schools, who also served as a teacher and principal. In 2005, the name was changed to Moore Traditional School. There is a recommendation on the consent agenda to officially appoint Dr. Wilner as the board representative to the Cradle to Career Cabinet. Cradle to Career is a commitment by this community to support students as they move through the education pipeline and to make sure they have wraparound support. Now I'd like to go to the board's dashboard. We show this dashboard at every meeting. This dashboard actually shows some important information. It shows staff and student attendance, staff vacancies, and referrals and suspensions. The point of this is time spent on learning is critical to the success of our students. So here's the dashboard currently. You can see that average daily attendance is about the same as it was last year. Total unexcused absences trending about the same. Staff average daily attendance in the middle on the top is about the same. Staff capacity, you can see that we've filled 6,417 vacancies. We have 81 currently vacant, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about vacancies. Behavior incidents are up, and of course we attribute that to the care that we're taking in making sure that every referral is recorded, and suspensions are up. What our board is able to do is then click and go to individual screens about each of these items. So this is student attendance. The next is staff attendance. Total behavior occurrences. Here's where you can see that the increase at the elementary is primarily at the elementary level, even though there's an increase at every level. And then for certified vacancies, what you can see is the number of resignations and retirements in new positions, but there are only 3.5 positions that are still vacant that have been vacant all year, and you can see the total when you combine new positions and the effect of retirements and resignations at a total of 81. I'd like to thank the Somali community for including myself, Dr. Averett, and resource teacher Pam Sheehan in a community conversation on Saturday night. As you know, our limited English proficient subgroup is our fastest growing subgroup. According to JCPS data books, our LEP population has increased by 25% by approximately 1,447 students in the last 5 years, or since 2013-14. So we serve 7,224 LEP students in this current school year, as reported in our data books. We are expanding our ESL Newcomer Academy by 10 classrooms. Vision 2020 recognizes that diversity and differences are assets to our system. So here's another picture of the community conversation at the Americana Center. And they even showed us one of the dances from their country. So we appreciate their hospitality. I appreciate the opportunity to participate as a member of the Commissioner's Accountability Steering Committee. The accountability work groups have worked for months to design elements of Kentucky's new accountability system under the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. So what happens is, on the next slide, you can see all the subgroups and working groups. These work groups have given recommendations to the Accountability Steering Committee that I serve on, which in turn will make recommendations of the overall system to Dr. Pruitt, who will seek approval from the Kentucky Board of Education. Our current timeline does call for a new system for 17-18. And I thought it would be helpful to the board. On the next slide, you can see how well we are represented on each of these working groups and subgroups. So Chair Brady, I'm recommending for approval the consent agenda later in this meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Hargens. It is now time to have to see if there's a motion to receive the superintendent's report. Is there a motion? Motion by Vice Chair Wilner. Is there a second? Second by Member Porter. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Motion passes. As per our amended agenda items, it is now time to discuss or to have speakers who wish to address the board come up and present. Our first speaker will be Chris Higdon, Mr. Higdon or Ms. Higdon, I'm not sure which. If you would, while on your way up, let me just read a few items here. I'll read our board policy regarding speakers, so please bear with me on this. Just to let everyone know, any person or persons wishing to present a matter to the board shall register with the secretary of the board prior to the meeting. The subject of the presentation shall be stated at that time. Materials intended for consideration by the board may be left with the secretary at the time of registration. If speakers have materials to present to the board at this meeting, then the materials are to be given to the secretary, which is right over there. That's Ms. Gilpin, so they can be distributed to the board. Presentation shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers will hear a bell at the end of at the 2.5 minute mark, and 2 bells once time has elapsed. The board shall reserve the right to limit or extend or terminate discussion of any subject. If there's an item that the superintendent needs to follow up on, they will look into the speaker's issues, and if necessary, a representative of the board will follow up on the recommended item to the board. Also, undue interruption or the other interference with the orderly conduct of the board business cannot be allowed. Defamatory or abusive remarks are always out of order. The chairperson may terminate the speaker's participation if, after being called to order, the speaker persists in improper conduct or remarks. So that is our policy regarding speakers. Mr. Higdon, if you would like to come up. And next on deck, if you want to make your way up here after Mr. Higdon is finished, will be Miss Sarah Carpenter. Mr. Higdon.
Thank you, board, for hearing me. I'm sorry I'm not fully prepared. I really wasn't expecting to come out until just a few hours ago.
Mr. Higdon, can you make sure your microphone is on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I am a parent of a first grade student at Bloom Elementary. We've had a little bit of a trying year, and I'd like just to give you a little bit of my little bit of the story, because I don't know all the bureaucracy and the red tape. I know how much you all have to go through to make things happen. We've lost our teacher. He retired the first week of our school year. From that point on, we've had, I think, roughly 5 substitute teachers. Our last one we had, she was able to stay with us for about a month and a half, and we lucked out, and she was amazing. Our kids were striving, they were moving ahead. I would go in once a week for lunch or things like that, helped with our food program at the school, and I saw behavioral changes. I saw kids really understanding what they were supposed to be doing as first graders, and it was great. Right, I guess, a couple weeks before Christmas break, we found out a new teacher had been put in, and while, we were a little saddened by that, we understood. We heard it was a tenured teacher. We found out that the teacher was on leave, and we were told, teacher's on leave, get precedent, and that's why this teacher was being put in. The day before Christmas break let out, I read an article in the Courier Journal that this teacher had multiple behavioral incidences with students and was suspended and then put into our school. So I guess my issue is I wish our principal, I wish the people that are allowed to make choices and allowed to pick our teachers within our schools can give some input on the particular classroom, because this is a group of kids that really needs a great teacher, and we didn't need to be just overshadowed and throwing someone in this situation. That's really all I have to say.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Higdon. Ms. Carpenter, you're next. Next on deck after Ms. Carpenter will be Rob Matthew. Ms. Carpenter, I believe your subject is also on the topic of Bloom.
It is. Hi. I've been at Bloom. My daughter is actually not in this classroom, but we were kind of blindsided by what's going on. So I wrote a couple of things. I'm here this evening to discuss the placement of this teacher. This teacher, Ms. Swan, has been placed at our school, and she was suspended because of harming a child, and we were not informed of the incidents of what...
Ma'am, we can't talk, we can't...
Okay,
go into
according
names.
to the Courier Journal.
Well, even with that, we can't,
Okay.
that is part of our rules here, so
Okay.
please refrain from naming individuals.
Okay. Our administration, our SBDM, and didn't get a say on her placement at the school. And we are blindsided as parents of this teacher and her placement at our school. And we would like to know what we can do to handle the situation and what the board and Dr. Hargens is going to do. Because I understand that what I understand is the board doesn't get to choose the placements, but it's the HR department and the superintendent. Is that correct? Do you all know the process?
We're in the process of not answering questions at the time. The superintendent can follow up your questions.
Okay. Us as parents, we feel like we're blindsided with the situation, and there's not much has been done or is being done to help this situation. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Up next will be Rob Matthew regarding responsibilities of the board. Up next, Ms. Melissa Lloyd will make her way to the front regarding teacher reassignments after allegations. And once again, I'll just make a statement that you are not to call out individuals.
I just wonder if you could refer to Frank.
There's an open question, Frank. Ms. Vice Chair Wilner, will you please ask your question to the council?
I'm just wondering if you could advise the board and also the public about what's allowable and what isn't in these comments regarding personnel.
Right. Under the Kentucky statutes, the board does not have the ability or the authority, and in fact they're prohibited for becoming involved in individual personnel decisions, with a few exceptions for the superintendent and the board attorney and the treasurer, so that complaints about individuals should not be brought to the board because the board has no authority to deal with them. They're within the superintendent's authority. And also, as Chair Brady has pointed out, individual names should not in any event be brought up in a public meeting, and individuals should not be subjected to attacks or criticism in this public forum.
Mr. Matthew.
Thank you all for being here, and I want to congratulate our new board members. I'm very happy to see you here. Just wanted to point out what I've observed the last 2 years as a parent as it relates to board behavior, decisions, and interaction. A heated discussion surrounding the renewal of Dr. Hargens' contract in which a board member angrily chastised fellow members for wanting to wait 2 weeks for community feedback. Board members repeatedly told, using the backing of a consultant study of exactly one meeting, that they were spending too much time on consent agenda items and then having their questions and comments about items before them cut short. The proposal that you mentioned tonight, allowing the chairperson to silence board members. Community members, including me, sign up to speak, waiting hours to do so, and then being denied the chance without a vote of the full board. Board policies that are given 2 readings, that are to be given 2 readings, push to vote upon only 1 reading and without the opportunity for discussion or comment from the community. Information on the agenda is becoming increasingly less detailed, and information that board members needed to review being late, non-existent, or buried in bulk areas of the consent agenda rather than pulled out as a separate item. A recent example of this is the $125,000 project manager for the Men of Color Academy, which I understand board members had to push hard to get information on. I find it troubling that the board didn't table this issue for further discussion, seeing how poorly written and contrary to the stated values of the academy that the proposal was. Board members making statements as though they were on behalf of the board and not their own individual comments. Board members who are more interested in reading Twitter comments about the meeting or shuffling papers in front of them than they are in listening to the speaker before them, including during the salary freeze fiasco, a cancer survivor who was giving her emotional testimony about her dedication to her job despite her illness. Decisions and recommendations being made on salary studies with little transparency by select members of the business community with little or no input from the community at large. The same salary study being used for goals counter to the audits that had resulted in the salary study, and counter to the advice in the study, such as last month's proposal to raise the pay grade of the equity officer. Seeing people told here that Dr. Hargens will get back to them, and then never knowing about any of the follow-up that happens, especially on major issues. This is to let you know that this new board is a clean slate. The past years have seen a climate in which JCPS has forgotten its primary customers, its students, parents, teachers, and staff. This cannot continue. As a JCPS parent of 10 years, I'm letting you know I will no longer accept a board or a superintendent who does not encourage active debate, demand detailed and timely information about the proposals in front of them, and first and foremost, put the people you both serve and support first above all other audiences. Nothing you have before you short of legal action, safety, or personnel issues should be considered so urgent that it cannot be open for debate and pushed back for further research and discussion. While I realize your goal is to reach unity, you must not be intimidated into forgetting that you are elected to serve as an individual voice on the board, not a rubber stamp. In closing, I think we have a good board in place, and I'm looking forward to my daughter's last years being positive ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthew. Ms. Lloyd, it's now your turn up on deck. Ms. Lloyd will be our last speaker, and Ms. Lloyd's subject is regarding teacher reassignments after allegations.
Yes, good evening. Thank you again for the motion to move this forward so we don't have to wait through your meeting. I would like to address teacher reassignments after allegations have been made against a teacher. I am also a parent at Bloom, where a teacher who has had 3 allegations of excessive discipline was reassigned to our school, and I strongly feel that if you have allegations of hurting a child, parents, number one, should be notified immediately. I believe I should have the option of deciding whether my child is under somebody's care who has been known to hurt children before. These allegations, whether proven to be true or not, I believe that these teachers should be put in a non-classroom assignment during investigations and possibly not back into a classroom assignment. Our children have had substitutes this entire year. Our teacher retired, I guess, after 6 days of teaching, and it's been a horrible year for our first graders. They have, I'm sure, not made near the progress that the other children in the school have. This is obviously a very important year for reading, writing, math, and they've had different teachers every 2 weeks, different sets of rules, very inconsistent. And then to know that a teacher was assigned to our school without our principal or our SBDM being able to choose that said teacher is very disheartening. I feel that Mr. Jacobs, our principal, would know a lot better than Dr. Hargens or the board who should be placed at our school, as would any principal in their school. He is the leader of our school. He is in our classrooms. He knows this class has really struggled. There are some children in there who are really having some difficulties right now, and having a teacher who now parents are very concerned about is not acceptable to me. I would like for somebody to let me know what actions are taken with teachers who have allegations of abuse, to train them, to give them some sort of anger management skills, disciplinary action. What is done to help this teacher that I know if my child is in trouble, she is not going to be grabbed by the arm, or that she is not going to have her glasses knocked off of her face. I feel very strongly about that young children shouldn't have to be in that situation. And as a parent, I trust you all to make the decision to have adults who can lead these children. And I don't want somebody with the abuse allegations leading my children. And I do believe in second chances, but not when children are involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lloyd.
Chair Brady, could I address the Bloom parents, as that's in my district?
Yes.
I've met with, excuse me, Rabbi Chotner, one of the parents of the first grade. I've met with Principal Jacobs. Speaking as a parent, I would feel all the same emotions I think that the parents have conveyed. And I will continue to work with Assistant Superintendent Dillard, Principal Jacobs, and the parents. If there are parents here after the meeting is over, please feel free to grab me. If not, please feel free to get in touch, and I'll get together with you anytime.
Okay, so we're going to move on to action items at this time. First item up, first item up under action items will be the approval of the 2017 legislative position statement on charter schools. Dr. Hargens, I'll turn it over to you to introduce the subject.
Thank you. At our last board meeting, which was in December, the board approved a legislative agenda. During that time, they said the board said you would request that we go more deeply into position about charter schools. So since last meeting, in the last 4 weeks, a document was drafted, and that was on the e-meeting materials for your review. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lowe, who is our Director of Strategy and who works with both policy and legislative action, to give us an update of where we are.
Thank you. So the policy position statement that you have before you is a bringing together of a set of items that were included from a variety of sources. We had a lot of input on different recommendations that people wanted to bring forward, including the Kentucky Board of Education, the Kentucky School Boards Association, the Kentucky Association of School Administrators, the Annenberg Charter School Standards, which is a nationally recognized organization. JCTA also had policy positions. The goal was to come to consensus on a relatively short list of things that were important to bring forward as potential improvements to charter school legislation. 2 bills have already been filed. It's not meant to be a comprehensive list or a white paper that talks about all best practices with charter schools. It's really, my personal feeling is that such documents are really sort of conversation starters with legislators to kind of bring forward the sense of the board, but also to hear what they have to think about it and see whether there's an opportunity for improvements. Part of the other thing that is important when you're working in the General Assembly is to take into account sort of the lay of the land, and that's both sort of like people who share positions that you can kind of work together to have a common voice, which can frequently kind of be valuable. So if 4 or 5 organizations are saying the same thing, that may resonate with a wider set of legislators than otherwise. And then also to take into account some realities, which is the great likelihood that charter school legislation will pass this session. We have historically not been supportive of charter schools, and so now we're in a position of hoping to get the best piece of legislation that we can. In any event, the 12 items that are on the proposed position statement cover a wide variety of things, from authorizers and accountability to enrollment and finance and regulatory oversight. Briefly on how this was brought together, as I said, there were a large number of sort of potential things that we could talk about, all from credible sources, that needed to be sort of brought to a more reasonable number, and also make sure that the most important things kind of rose to the top. So board members had an opportunity to kind of weigh in on the things that they thought were important or the very important, maybe not so important. That was taken into account, as well as looking at sort of the consensus things. Are 4 or 5 of those organizations kind of all landing at the same place, or is a position a single outlier? And then finally, there was a degree of sort of taking a look and making sure there wasn't something critically important that was missing. And, that's always, there's a level of judgment that's taken into account, and different people will have different positions on, what's most important or less important. So this is the best shot in trying to bring something forward that we can use when we speak to legislators.
All right. There's been a great deal of interest and discussion amongst board members about this subject, both on the past board and I know there's been concerns expressed by current board members. I'm going to open up this time for discussion. So I'm not going to do this in any particular order, so whoever wants to chime in first, raise your hand. Vice Chair Wallner.
So I think there's value in working in coalition with other nonpartisan organizations. So I think the recommendations of the PTA and the Kentucky School Board Association and the Kentucky Association of School Administrators, that you've incorporated that into this document. Is that right? So there's a lot of crossover here.
I would say that the items that had the most kind of consensus around them, with more than 2 or 3, or those that had 3 or more, are definitely on this document. Mm-hmm. It doesn't cover the gamut of what all of those organizations said, because it's like a Venn diagram, right? And there are some things that only one of them said, but it was my best attempt to sort of triangulate the things that were coming forward as positive improvements.
So Thank you. That's helpful. And I think, you know, there are certainly examples of some charter schools that have been successful. There are also examples of charter schools that have been fraudulent and have really exploited kids and have, you know, skipped town with lots of money in their pockets. And I think the Annenberg Standards has been a real, well, we said at our prior meeting that we were going to approve a statement that said research and best practices related to charter schools. And from my perspective, the Annenberg Standards really is sort of the gold standard of what the best practices are nationally. It's you know, educators from states that experienced some of those abuses coming together and saying, here's where there was a lack of transparency, here's where there was an opportunity for fraud. And so I think it really is, the Annenberg Standards really represents good public accountability. So I would just recommend that we consider adding a bullet point that just says adoption of the Annenberg Standards and use that as one of our talking points as we have conversations with legislators and others about the charter schools.
Anyone else? Member Gies?
I'd like to see if we could review this point by point. I know that myself, as well as Member Kolb, had a few points of interest that we'd like to look at further and maybe look at possibly amending a few of these. I've made a copy of my suggested edits if everyone would like to see. I believe there's also been a copy provided to show up on the screen if we could just have a slight discussion on the different points.
May I make a suggestion is that we go around, see what everyone's comments are or questions of Jonathan, and then we take a look at this point by point to make sure we give everyone an overview of being able to express that.
Yes, I think that's fine.
All right. So we'll get to that in just a moment. Anyone else want to discuss or express their views?
Okay. I agree with Vice Chair Wilner that the Annenberg Standards should really be what we focus on. I mean, I think, well, I know that this is the most comprehensive national research-based set of practices that are recommended. In particular, I think I'd be a little uneasy about just kind of adding on a bullet point because there are some that could create some ambiguity. For instance, the first point on the draft from Mr. Lowe says establish local school districts as charter authorizers, and the Annenberg Standards say, in addition to that, remove the ability of state charter authorizing commissions to overturn denials of charter applications by local authorizers. Locally made decisions not to license a charter school should be honored. I think it's really worth spelling that out in detail, and for many reasons, but I guess the most foundational of which is that, you know, we are an elected school board, and if the voters of Jefferson County decide that they don't like any one of our individual positions on charter schools, they have a mechanism to vote us out of office. And I think once you transfer any kind of authority over that outside the locality, we're going to lose autonomy. And I think it's really important because Jefferson County Public Schools is so unique within the state of Kentucky that we don't lose that autonomy. I mean, that's just one reason, for instance. I would also like to say that, you know, as Mr. Lowe points out, charter legislation is almost surely, though not definitely, almost surely going to pass the General Assembly and be signed into law. I would just like to go on record as saying that and I plan to work with state legislators openly and collaboratively to craft the best legislation possible. And I think that the vast majority of people that promote charter schools do so out of a genuine desire to see kids succeed. I think it's worth recognizing, though, that without charter schools, the state legislature already possesses the capability of removing restrictions on public school districts. I mean, if one of the arguments that we continually hear is that there's too many rules and regulations, but very often it's the state themselves that has put those rules and regulations in place. Not always, but very often. And, you know, as I think somebody referenced earlier, the credible nonpartisan evidence from over 20 years is pretty definitive about, are charter schools good for kids, or do they create more problems than they solve? And the credible nonpartisan scholarly research is that they create more problems than they solve, and that if we support public schools, they can get the results that even the highest performing charter schools get, if not more. And then finally, I think it's worth noting that we are now a majority minority district. 55% of our students are non-white, and the NAACP has recently called for a complete moratorium on charter schools. So I think it's, we are, our constituency is majority minority, and it's difficult for me the NAACP is an organization I respect greatly, and it's difficult for me to advance something that organization is against. But like I said, I'm committed, like everybody else, I think, to working with state legislators to get the best law that we can.
Any other comments? Member Duncan.
Jonathan, have we seen any of the versions that are yet to be revealed? Has anybody talked about those?
No, and but several board members, Mr. Brady and Mr. Kolb and Dr. Hargens and myself, did have a meeting with the House Education Committee chair, new chair, Bam Carney, and had a really, I thought, very productive conversation where he expressed his strong support for public education, and that I felt that several of the issues that have been raised by this board were things that were already on his mind as things to consider when looking at what the House is going to do when the Senate passes their version of the bill. So my sense is there's an opportunity for continued communication and dialogue about what that really means in terms of what the bill will look like. And one of the reasons why I'm hoping that we land on something tonight is because the time between now and February 7th is the opportunity to to express opinions about what would be best for good charter school legislation.
Well, I thought you did a really remarkable job of synthesizing those things that we had, our issues we'd raised. We were sent a 73-item survey, and it comes back with 12 items that I agreed with every single one of them, except for I'm still having trouble with charter schools having a school board, their own school board. But I'm sure all of this is going to be discussed and debated and worked out. And I was very pleased with the items that you came up with for us, and surprised how I felt about those. So I think what we have to do is watch for the versions that are coming out that are closest to what we're espousing here. And I think if charter schools, if it's a design that does not hurt us and does not hurt the public school, then maybe we can find one that will be something that we can wholeheartedly support. But I appreciate the work, really, that you did on this. It was great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments from anyone who hasn't had a chance as of yet? Okay. So Mr. Gies has made a suggestion to go through this item point by point. I will say a couple things. One, I do think that this document, as Jonathan has already mentioned, should be brief. This is something that, regarding legislators, it should not be a white paper, a deep dive research, and I think that Annenberg, in and of itself, has done a lot of that for us. So my own 2 cents is that I agree with the idea of having Annenberg as being the go-to regarding charter school standards that that we should look to. So with the board's permission, I'm going to start with Mr. Gies, and we'll start with this point by point, and then we'll talk about any other items that we feel that might be important that should be added, or we'll have that open discussion. And as I said at the very beginning of my opening remarks regarding chair, this is the part of the process where we may be, we might take a little bit more time than what we have in the past. But this is the only time, especially by open meetings laws, that we have an opportunity to be able to discuss these things amongst ourselves. So before I do start with Mr. Gies, Ms. Horn has come up with a question, so I want to give her the opportunity to ask it.
But we're going point by point, but the idea of adding something additional with the Annenberg standards, we'll just add that as another point to figure out how to incorporate that if we wanted to into the document. So we'll go point by point, but let's not forget about that.
Yes, and that's why I said at the very end of this, we can talk about anything we wish to add, or if there's anything that really think might be too much. So, Mr. Gies, I'll start it with you.
Yes, well, I again want to reiterate that we're very grateful for Mr. Lowe's document. I again agreed with the vast majority of this document. I just had some very slight edits, and I think that my colleagues had some similar edits. So I'd just like to go through those point by point. I'd also like to reiterate that I think that compromise is key. I think that's a component of good government, and I think that this is a very intelligent stance for us to take, the stance of compromise. And I'm very grateful that we appear to have come to a consensus on that compromise stance. I think that's very well founded. The first point of interest that I had was under authorizers. Mr. Lowe's document currently reads, establish local school districts as charter authorizers. I think that myself and other board members would agree that if we could change that language to establish local democratically elected school boards as sole charter authorizers, that would be more reflective of our position. I don't know if you'd like me to go point by point, or if we'd like to stop and then
let's
have some
stop and talk
discussion.
about that. Is there any differing view on going with or any different ideas other than what Mr. Gies has proposed here for this one particular point?
I'd love to hear what Jonathan has to say. Just get your thoughts.
Jonathan, do you have a copy of what we have?
I do have a copy of it.
All right.
So, two things. One is any school board in Kentucky, as far as I'm aware, is democratically elected. So that may emphasize something that's important to put forward as to recognize. But in terms of like impact, I'm not sure what that does. The second thing is the question of charter authorizers, as far as I can tell, is going to be one of the major points of debate. So the current legislation has, I think, 5 different potential authorizers, including mayors, post-secondary institutions, local school boards, other entities. And I think that there's going to be a bit of back and forth on that. So, making the board's position on that clear makes sense.
So, with this particular point, yes, Member Horn.
Donna, what do you think? What do you think about having like the mayor be able to be a charter authorizer versus like just the democratically elected school boards? What do you think?
I actually think the intent of the board as they made the discussion was to establish the local school districts as the charter authorizers. So I think what Mr. Gies has done is made it really clear, sole. Right. And as Jonathan said, you are democratically elected, but it emphasizes that. That's Dr. Kolb's point. So I think that was the intent of the board. You didn't intend for there to be other
Correct.
authorizers.
I'd just like to say I have to have the word soul in there. And I would want to add this Annenberg language about the overturning of denials. It's the second Annenberg point. I don't know if you had that in front of you or not. We don't know what's going to happen to the State Board of Education. For instance, if the State Board of Education becomes differently constituted and they can overturn decisions that we make, it basically invalidates, making charter schools or making local school boards the sole authorizers. So I'm concerned that there'll be a backdoor around that, and would like to suggest that we try not to leave that backdoor open.
Are we in agreement on that particular point?
So I do have a question about that. What I'm hearing, I think, is that people are interested in adding a bullet point that sort of says, and we agree with the Annenberg standards. And does that address your issue on wanting to make that, or are you looking for an additional?
I mean, it does technically, but I think it's just you're creating a situation where confusion, intentional or unintentional, feigned or real confusion, is going to happen. And I hear what you're saying about, this is not a white paper, this is a starting point. My concern with that is the interpretation of that by state legislators. They may not see it that way. I don't know. I mean, you've worked in Frankfurt. I haven't. But I'm concerned that somebody might come back at us and say, well, look, I mean, you guys gave us this thing, and this wasn't in there, or this is what you said, and now you want more. And I'd like to be as clear as possible about what we do think is favorable.
So are we okay with going with what Dr. Kolb has suggested here, starting with Mr. Gies's starting point?
And just to be clear, that's spelling out the Annenberg language about over to the second bullet point.
Okay, so let's move on. We're using as our template here, we're using as our template what the document that was posted on our portal is, but also what Mr. Gies has done, because he's also done that. So we're going to move on with that. Regarding our next item here, accountability, require teachers to be certified by the Education Professional Standards Boards. Any discussion or changes regarding that particular bullet point? All right, hearing nothing, we're going to move on. Yes.
It looks to me like I may not have the exact documents that you have. Is there another copy that I could have? Apologies.
Sure, that's fine.
All right. That language is actually existing on what was proposed already.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Your changes are in red, correct? Mr. Gies?
Yes, that is correct.
Next item over here is it states within the position that was posted on our portal, establish required reporting from charter schools to include entrance data, cohort compilation rate, expulsion and discipline data, performance achievement gap data by defined subpopulations to the Commissioner and Interim Joint Committee on Education. Any changes regarding that particular bullet point? All right, moving on. Yes. All right, moving on. Next item here, next bullet point will permit only independent nonprofit entities to manage charter schools. The nonprofit entities should not be owned or managed by a for-profit entity. Is there questions or concerns regarding this particular item? Nope.
Can I mean,
yes.
I'm sorry. I mean, this is a
Go
messy
ahead.
process.
It is messy,
and
but this is part of the democratic deliberative process.
I'm just wondering, are we creating confusion if we say, and the Annenberg standards, but then we have some of the Annenberg standards in here? I think it could create a situation where folks interpret that and say, well, look, you mentioned specific Annenberg standards, so do you just mean those, or?
I have a suggestion.
Yeah, please.
Kind of what I was saying in the beginning is I would say that maybe we want to have in the beginning kind of like a preamble that would say something about, kind of like what you all adopted last time, but you actually, say we are adopting the Annenberg standards and these are some that we will highlight. So we highlight some, but we have this preamble that has the Annenberg standards as our standard, that's what we're interested in putting forth to the world, and then we have some which we're going to highlight. So it's, I have a little footnote in a sense. Like we can't just repeat, we're not going to repeat the Annenberg standards, but for Kentucky, these are some that we, so it's, you got to kind of add a preamble.
Well, I guess I would, my concern with that would be that people would be looking at what's on our list and recognizing that there are things that are on that are not on the Annenberg standards, and that might be confusing. I'm just in terms of clarity, well, that if there are things on the Annenberg standards that you think are sufficiently, prioritize that they need to be a separate bullet on our own document, and then they get repeated on the Annenberg standards, I think that that's, as long as it's exactly the same, that would be okay with a single bullet for the Annenberg standards. I'm just trying to think of a practical way to move forward. I'm not like drafting a preamble and then getting a vote tonight seems like a challenge.
I mean, I agree with Board Member Horn. I think the workaround for that particular challenge is, you know, we could just simply, I mean, I think it's just a sentence. We could say exactly what Board Member Horn said and then say, and select other bullet points that we have pulled from, you know, nonpartisan research-based, you know, entities like KSBA, like National PTA. I'd be willing to.
How about the Jefferson County Board of Education recommends incorporating the Annenberg Charter School accountability standards into this legislation?
All of the Annenberg standards.
Well, except, well, maybe recommend using Annenberg standards in addition to what is pointed out, or that's really poor wording on my part, but pointed out here within this document. Some words to that extent. Or we could say something along the line, or except otherwise were noted below.
I think either Board Member Horn or Jonathan said it, I can't remember, but some of which have been highlighted here for emphasis.
I think that's the
is good language. And I would just like the word all to be in there, or each of the Annenberg standards.
Member Duncan.
I'm just wondering if we should be trying to wordcraft this right now. Would it be better to submit these to Jonathan and then allow him to meld this into something?
Ideally, yes, but we've already done that. At least I've done that, and I mean,
one possibility would be for us to adopt something now that includes the Annenberg bullet, as it were, and then come back on the 24th with more artful language with a preamble.
Very good.
Does that not, I know you're concerned about time frame, does that not lose time for us? I mean,
my personal belief about the value of this document is not that legislators are going to be going line by line. I think it's an opportunity for me and for Dr. Hargens and for our McCarthy colleagues. We hire a lobbying firm and they do a great job for us. That they know what the conversation needs to get to when they're having conversations with legislators. So I think that if we get, as long as we get a vote tonight that includes the things that you want to have included, the opportunity to revise the language to get to the more, that would be my recommendation, is to make sure that we land on something that we can all agree on tonight, and then we can revise it as needed on the 24th. They do not come back into session until February 7th. Okay. There will be sort of conversations and discussions that are happening with leadership in particular, but probably less so with rank and file legislators until the 7th.
I mean, I think that we just did it. I don't think that it's not, I don't, think that we need to try to wordsmith it. I think that we have a lot more in our board meeting to do, so we can, give you a shot at it, and, to write that first part about how, what I've already said. You can rewind it, and I think it's there, and then we can continue to go through what we're going through, and then we're going to have a lot more of a board meeting, and then maybe we can postpone the vote until the end, so you might have something, because the timing is that we do want to have something that we can adopt today if possible. I don't think we're that far away from it. I think this is possible if we're willing to give it a try, and if we fail, we fail, but if we don't, we don't. And so why don't we go ahead and continue on? I think we know that we might agree on that point, and then by the time we get to the bottom, you can go while we continue the meeting and work a little bit, and then we'll vote at the end, maybe.
I am on the agenda for another agenda item, but I do think that,
You know what I
that
mean?
what you're suggesting can work.
All right, so we're going to continue on. Okay, next item is permit only independent nonprofit entities to manage charter schools. The nonprofit entities should not be owned or managed by a for-profit entity. Any discussion regarding this particular item? Okay. Next item, prohibit virtual/online charter schools. Hearing no other issues with that, I'm moving on. Require charter enrollment to be available to any parent/guardian in a district. Okay, moving on. Prohibit exclusion of students due to disability or other characteristics.
I was just wondering if the new was to replace that second one?
Yes.
Because it's certainly
Okay.
much more
Yes.
detailed.
Okay, so Member Gies, if you'd like to go over this point.
Sure. Here under enrollment, I've taken the same language that Mr. Lowe has. I've just made it a bit more clear to put across what we're thinking as a board, and feel free to disagree with me if you do. But we've expanded that to say prohibit exclusion and/or expulsion of students due to intellectual and/or physical and/or emotional disabilities, limited English proficiency, and/or level of student parent/guardian involvement.
Any discussion about that amended language here?
Can we just tag on or any other characteristic to the end of Ben's?
I would be in agreement with that.
Okay.
Oh, just tag on the phrase or any other characteristic to the end of Ben's bullet point.
All right, moving on to the next item. Ensure that funding for charter schools does not detrimentally impact funding provided to other public schools. And we need to add possibly an end quote on that. Or maybe not. Yes. So we need to add an end quote on the bottom of that, just wordsmithing there or grammar. I will say that on this, I'm we're going to move on from this, but I would maybe like to see a little bit more detailed language on that, where I don't know what detrimentally impact means. So perhaps if we can firm that up to where, and I don't have a suggestion on that, it's just this seems to be a possible hole. So just some ambiguity there. So we're just going to note that, and we're going to move on.
Well, I do want to say that
Sure.
part of the, well, as you recall, because you were there, the conversation with House Education Committee Chair Carney suggested that he was sensitive to that concern, and so my sense is that that will be looked at pretty closely, he and the LRC staff, when they're doing it. I mean, in my mind, there's utility in keeping language in a document like this fairly broad, because if you limit it, then there may be something that we've omitted unintentionally that we really meant to carry forward.
Okay, so we'll move on from there, and just an idea on that item. Next item, require transparency regarding non-public funding sources and external organizations with which the charter school enters into a fee-for-service contract. Concerns or questions? Okay, moving on to our next item. This item does have a suggestion. The item as it stands now says approve funding to provide financial stability for districts with significant enrollment shifts due to charter schools as districts manage changes to their fixed cost. There's a suggestion from Mr. Gies. Mr. Gies, if you'd like to go forward with that.
I've just added on to that to make it a bit more specific as a result of per pupil allocations exiting public schools.
Questions regarding that?
I think I'm, on this one, more in favor of the original, just because of what Jonathan just said. about leaving it a little bit open-ended so we don't, I mean, I don't know, that may be the only thing, but maybe there's other aspects.
I would suggest that there are things other than per pupil allocations that might have a fiscal impact, and so the broader language would allow us not to be boxed in there.
Okay. I'm in agreement with that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Moving on to the next item, which I believe is an addition, if I'm reading this correctly, from Mr. Gies, and I know I'm breaking our format here, but since we're going down the list, should a charter student be removed or self-selects removal from a charter school, all public monies attached to said student shall return to public school district. With this particular item, I might add that the prorated amount for the time that student is coming back to the public school should be considered. That is not the way I would wordsmith that. I did actually have that as one of my original suggestions. You'll permit me for a moment of time to be able to find that. All right, so what I had suggested originally, and tell me if you like this, or we can go with your suggestion. Charter schools shall not keep for any student, or sorry, shall not keep funding for any student that leaves his charter school before the end of the school year to attend a common public school. If this occurs, then the prorated funding amount for that student shall follow the student to the common public schools they attend. I'd like to suggest that particular bullet point. Member Porter.
I have a question. Are we assuming that if they are not attending the charter school that they will return to a public school? I mean, that's an assumption that we're making because everybody does not go to public school. So should we say that the money should follow the student to wherever they go to school? No?
Jonathan, suggestion?
A couple of thoughts about this, and I'm not, I mean, following the student to anywhere they go would include a non-public school, and we probably don't want to head in that direction. And then the second thing is, this gets really complex because if you think about how funding works at the state level, they actually take like the number of students on a certain day, and then that becomes what you use in the subsequent year to determine seek funding. And so the prorated monies is sort of a same year kind of thing, and I'm not sure how they would reconcile that just in terms of drafting legislation. And so, you know, my thought again is to keep it broad, to say the general concept here is if a student leaves a charter school, the charter school shouldn't keep the money that they would that student generates for them. And but
that general idea, we're not looking for specifics on wordsmithing just yet. So is that what you're saying?
That's my recommendation, just because like the ins and outs of school funding are really complex, and to try and put it in a, you know, a talking paper is a challenge.
Okay.
Can I just
Yes.
to get to Ms. Porter's point, should it say, instead of just, should a charter student be removed or self-selects removal, should it be if a charter student returns to public school?
Okay. So are we in agreement with that? All right, moving on to our next item then. Next item here, exempt charter schools from state and local laws and regulations that do not specifically apply to charter schools except for those regarding accountability, health, safety, civil rights, disability employee background checks, open meetings / open records, FOIA request, and accounting practices. No concerns?
I was just wondering what the rationale for this one is. I'm coming from a place of ignorance on this particular bullet point. It's not in the Annenberg as far as I could see. What's the general purpose of this point?
I think it is written in the inverse of how it could be written. You could say, you know, charter schools shall not. And it's actually the way that the bill actually has it. It says, you know, charter schools shall adhere to accountability, health, safety, civil rights, disability statutes and regulations. So essentially, there's no opportunity for them to waive those things. And this is one of the ways that one of the other organizations chose to frame it.
Got it.
May I make a suggestion of this? And this is I think this gets to the same thing, but it just says it to me a little bit more simply. Charter school employees shall have the same rights as employees of common public schools in the district in which the charter school is located.
Okay. I think that's narrower than what this says, but I mean, it could be a good bullet point, but it's, so what was that?
Repeating that again, it's charter school employees shall have the same rights as employees at common public schools in the district in which the charter school is located. Member Horn has a question.
I do think that is too limiting because we're not necessarily only talking about employees here. But in this bullet point, is there any reason to believe that the things that are listed here, I think, did you just say that you would still have to comply with those things, or is there some question?
I think this is one of the things that you're just checking a box that's already been checked, which is to say every piece of charter school legislation I've ever seen over a decade has, most of these things. Not every one of them has open meetings, open records, and accounting practices, and Freedom of Information Act, but they do have the kind of health, safety, civil rights, accountability language. So I think that this is sort of just making clear to people, like, these are important things, don't forget about them.
Right, like the sunshine laws, I mean, I think that I would not want to take this out.
Okay.
And Mr. Brady, could you repeat that language, I guess we haven't decided what we're doing.
Well, we're going to, it sounds like the board is going to go with the original language that is listed. I will like to at least possibly come back to that point, because I think it does help with another issue that's going to be coming up here shortly. Next item is require members of charter schools boards to adhere to the same laws as other public school board members, including board training for ethics, finance, and appropriate staff evaluations. Concerns? All right, moving on. The next couple of added bullet points from Mr. Gies is require charter schools to implement elected site-based decision-making councils, or SBDMs. Any questions or concerns regarding that? Yes, Mr. Horn.
Could you simplify it and just add it to the list of things previously?
Yes.
So we want to add SBDMs to the item that talks about exempting charter schools from state and local laws. Questions about that? Okay. The last bullet point that Mr. Gies has suggested here is charter schools shall prohibit union membership. Shall not prohibit union membership. This also comes back to the point that I made a little bit earlier. I kind of jumped the gun on it. But when regarding what I might suggest is, instead of that, it says charter school employees shall have the same rights as employees at common public schools in the district in which the charter school is located. And the reason I mention that is because union membership is part of that, but also the point of that particular bullet point that I wanted to get across is that this district has a non-discrimination clause, and I'm concerned that there could be charter schools out there that might not follow those same non-discrimination clauses. And also, there's been a recent decision from the courts that, in my view, can possibly endanger some of the fairness ordinances that cities around the state have enacted. And we have enacted something that is similar, but that is within the district level, so that is not applicable to what this board has decided and what this district has adopted as policy. So are we in agreement with that particular item? So, yes.
The way you just worded it?
The way I worded it.
Right.
Does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, would you mind emailing it to me or something?
Yes, I can. It's actually,
I just want to get it right.
Sure, it's actually, you actually have it in your big sheet.
Okay.
And also, it's one of the points that I emailed to you a few weeks back.
I'll get it. Thank you.
All right. So those are the items that were listed here. In addition to that, are there any other bullets or items that board members would like to discuss as far as adding to this document?
I just would like to suggest that we offer our teachers a chance to weigh in and see if they want to add anything, or if there's anything that we're overlooking, or I don't know if there's representation from JCTA here, or, you know, and you don't have to take me up on this. Maybe we've done fine, but because this is, you know, tonight we're doing the deal. You know, I just want to make sure that we are not overlooking anything that teachers might be in a position to alert us to.
So we'll take a moment here to invite leadership from JCTA to address this item in a spirit of collaborativeness.
Who's the high-ranking?
Or sacrificial lamb?
Hi, I'm Alan Young, and I am a JCTA board member, and I'm looking back at all these other folks back here, and they told me to come up. I had just a couple of points. First of all, on that last point that you brought up, I don't think that that is mutually exclusive with the point about not prohibiting union membership. I think you could make both points. And I think those would make it clear as to, because it may not be clear, that in places, since this is state law, where they may not yet have union membership, but those are changing contexts and situations where those things are afforded, that I would say that those both and more kind of thing versus an either or on those statements. So that'd be one counsel. The other part that I noticed too when we talked about, and I saw a little bit of hesitation in board member Kolb's suggestion around the nonprofit, is that there are places where the actual EMOs or other things are nonprofit, but they actually have relationships with for-profits. And that is not spelled out in your policy. And it's often, I don't want to know it's a common practice, but it's not necessarily rare, where they themselves are not for profit, but everyone that they work with then can be a person who benefits financially when they work and utilize services in other kinds of folks. And so your board position doesn't take it one step removed, that those nonprofit authorizers should not also be working in ways that there are people who they're related to benefit financially. So that kind of a concept, I think, is a little bit missing and leaves you a little bit exposed with people who absolutely know they should arrange themselves as a nonprofit, but they literally work with groups that their uncle has this for-profit business that we're going to contract with. And so those kinds of conflicts of interest things, or at least something I think is an exposure point.
So and I'm not necessarily advocating that we do this at this point, but we have the language right now, permit only independent nonprofit entities to manage charter schools. A nonprofit entity should not be owned or managed by a for-profit entity. Would the sentence, if a charter school contracts with third parties to manage and or operate the school, these entities must also comply with all open meetings, open records, and other transparency requirements that public schools must follow? Would that address your point, or is that something
I think
different?
to some degree, but there's also those kinds of conflicts of interest laws and things where a person would have to pull themselves out if they're going to benefit someone that is a relative or something like that. And I think that those kinds of things are not necessarily part of your statement. And we do see those kinds of things popping up around the country where people organize themselves for nonprofits, but they absolutely, one step removed, there's somebody that's getting really financial gain from it. So it's just they've understood how to play the game.
Member Horn?
I think it's duplicative if we were to, Chris, if we were to add that double language, because I do think the section that you read for me satisfies, on page 4, at the bottom, applicants to operate a charter school. It does address both of those, ideas, and then the other one we just hit with on page 3, regulatory oversight. Because they would be, we're asking for this open meetings, open records. That's the Sunshine Laws is what we're asking for there. SBDM, where there are parents involved. So I don't know. I think it'd be duplicative if we, it seems like there's overkill and there's overkill, but it is on page 1. The second from the bottom seems to address it, unless I'm missing. It doesn't seem like.
Okay, so is it fair to say that this will be something that Jonathan will take a look at and try and get back with us on, so we can move on with our agenda? Is there any question or comment regarding that? All right.
So I want to get explicit direction.
Sure.
Are you looking for, I actually, in the back of my mind, think that there is language that addresses something that Ellen is raising that I can pull from one of the many people that have weighed in. So if you're interested, I can bring that forward.
Yes.
Okay. And then before we move on, would it be okay if I kind of go through all of the things I've written down to make sure I'm not missing anything?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to thank the board for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is craft a preamble, as it were, a short language at the beginning that recognizes that we want to incorporate the Annenberg Charter accountability standards, some of which are being highlighted in the body of this document. And then moving forward, under authorizers, we're going to use the language that was suggested by Mr. Geese, and then directly below that, add a bullet that's being pulled from the Annenberg recommendations about overturning denials of charter schools by local entities. And then the next change, I'm just going to go over the change, is under applicants to operate a charter school, identify language that addresses the concern of relationships between nonprofit charter entities and for-profit companies that might be problematic. Under enrollment, we're going to adopt the new language and add "and any other characteristic" at the end of it. And then under finance, we're going to add the new language, approved funding to provide financial stability for districts with significant enrollment shifts due to charters. So add that language.
I think, didn't we say we're sticking with the original?
Oh, okay, I apologize. Good. That's why I wanted to go through this, just make sure we get it right. Under should a charter school student be removed, we're going to change that to should a charter school return to a public school. All public monies will be attached to said student. I wasn't clear about the prorated amount. Do we want to carry that or not?
Well, I can understand that there's going to be a concern about how to document that, and I don't have a clear answer on that, except for I do believe that if a charter school, if that student does attend a charter school for half the year, then that charter school should not see any of that money. I mean, they should see, to my view, half the year or one half of that student's funding for that year.
Okay.
That's the point I'm trying to get across.
And that might build.
I'm trying not to be an all or nothing.
I actually can see how you could draft that legislation. So we can, if that's the will of the board, we can add that.
Yes.
Okay, and then rather under regulatory oversights, rather than include the language about require charter schools to implement site-based decision-making councils, we're just going to add SBDMs to the first bullet that lists the things that they have to adhere to.
That's correct.
And then rather than the charter school shall not prohibit union membership, we're going to capture Mr. Brady's language regarding the that employees shall have the same rights as, or was it both?
I think after
That's right.
regarding Mr. Young's comments, I think we were looking at doing it both.
Okay.
Yes, both. Now, after all that being said, and you just we just kind of ran through that, do you think there's a need for you to come back to us, or do you want to go ahead and implement those changes and we move on from right now? Do you think you have everything you need?
I have everything I need.
Okay.
I don't.
So number one?
I am unclear. I'm just
Okay.
on page 1, what we're doing with with applicants to operate a charter school. I'm not clear.
So Mr. Young suggested language that was looking to address the issue that has arisen in other states where there'll be a not-for-profit entity that will have a direct and close relationship with for-profit entities through which they, move state money in ways that is not transparent and is not subject to. Now it strikes me one of the things that they're not permitted to do is go away from, the accounting practices. So it could be that we're protected, but anyway, I'm pretty sure that there is language that addresses the issue that Mr. Young was bringing forward, and what I would like to do is to find it and bring it back to you,
Okay.
and you all can say, yeah, that's great, or no, that's not what we meant at all, and we can cut it out.
All right. Is there any other discussion on this point? No? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to make a motion myself to postpone this item, to have it brought back before the board at our next meeting with the language that we've kind of agreed upon here. No?
No, tonight.
No, later tonight. I'm so sorry. Later tonight? Thank you. This is why we this is why we communicate. So later on tonight. Yeah. So we will table this item for the moment, and then we will move on to that. So do I have a motion to table this item for it to come back to us later on this evening? Motion? All right.
Second.
I'll make the motion. Member Gies has seconded. All those in favor of tabling this motion for it to come back tonight? Aye. It is unanimous. We will table this, and now we'll move on to our next item. The next action item.
Excuse me.
Yes.
When
Yes,
he
member.
comes back with the final product, could we have a talk through as to what's going to happen with our legislative agenda when it gets to Frankfurt, as opposed to how many legislative agendas will be there throughout the state, and who else will be having legislative agendas with this kind of language? I would like to have just a quick summary of what's going to happen next, because based on the recent votes, it is what it is. I mean, I'm happy that we're doing this, but things are being voted really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just like for us to hear what we think the potential is going to happen with the legislative agenda that we're sending to Frankfurt, if you don't mind.
Fair enough. We'll have that discussion at that time. All right. So the next action item is approval of draft district facilities plan and selection of hearing officer. So Dr. Hargens, I'll turn it over to you to introduce this item.
Actually, I'll give it right to Dr. Razor.
All right. Well, we have talked about the issues facing our infrastructure multiple times over the last probably 18 months. And we've mapped out at least what I consider a pretty logical progression. We have come to an understanding of what the problem is and what the current state of affairs are. And that was the infrastructure assessment. Then we looked at what other peer districts like ours, as well as other organizations that are facing the same situations, what were some potential things that they've done. Then we convened our local planning committee, which we got representatives from all stakeholder groups in the community, parents, community leaders, principals, teachers, central office staff. And we talked about the assessment. Then from that, last board meeting, I gave a work session in which some recommendations were made from the local planning committee. And we won't revisit those this evening, but those were things we needed. Well, actually, I will real quick. Those were some things that we could start immediately. We could, as Mr. Hudson mentioned earlier, begin immediately looking into some energy saving measures that might be an investment on the front end, however, would realize cost savings forever on the back end. We also could look immediately at security measures that I also talked about tonight in the work session, as well as begin planning for the 18-19 school year, where some more drastic things like a centralized ESL center and moving towards centralized early childhood classrooms, or centralized early childhood centers across the district. Those recommendations now, the other thing that I'll be asking in 2 weeks when we come back for the final reading of this and approval of the district facilities plan is for the board to create a working group or board committee around a strategic facilities plan, because that's my lead-in for this. What you have in front of you today has the word plan on it. You've heard me say it many times, this is not a plan, this is a laundry list. And this is, to Mr. Kolb's point earlier this evening, this is a bureaucratic compliance document that we must do to receive funding from the state of Kentucky. Now, it is not, I want to repeat though, an exercise in futility, because we do go through and we list the current need of every building based upon what we feel like we could feasibly do if that was a building we were choosing. We can't be extravagant if those buildings were chosen and we would use the funding that we have available to us. So I know there are lots of questions. There's a few things that I want to point out, but beyond that, I'm happy to answer your questions. But remember, this document drives nothing. By approving this plan, you've not approved any of these renovations. You've not approved new construction. You've just said that need exists. The other thing that I want to remind the board, this is a living, amendable document, because the one thing that I do need to point out, we are not able to do a capital project on a building or construct a new building unless it is listed on here. However, what my committee and my team did not do is also put the cart in front of the board's horse and propose things that you'd never heard about or that had not been approved as a direction to move in on here. The only piece of new construction that is on here right now is one additional elementary school. This is not intended to be on here as an additional elementary school, to add another elementary school to our footprint. This would be replacement new construction of an elementary school that was due to be renovated, but the renovation costs would outweigh the construction of a new building. Why only one then? Because over the next 4 years, given our projected funding, we could only construct one new elementary school and still, again, with our projected current funding, and still attempt to keep up with our aging, failing HVAC systems. So I'll wrap that up there. I know there are some questions in here, and I'm going to try to answer you as directly as I can. Again, this is not a good document to work for direction, and that's not really what I'm trying to provide from this document. It's basically the board saying, my team has established $1.3 billion in need in this district.
Thank you, Dr. Raitzer. Are there questions or concerns? Member Duncan.
You know, I remember this document receiving criticism. I don't see how this one's different than what we had before, where we have a wish list, and then that was criticized for being nothing, no plan or whatever. It's not intended to be a plan. It was explained like that as it's not a plan, and this one looks the very same way.
This is a KDE template that we fill out.
Right.
What we intend to be different is we've actually made, where this has no vehicle for that, my committee has actually now made recommendations that they're asking the board to adopt alongside this or at a later time. They could be adopted as they go, but here's the direction to fix some of the issues. I think the criticism came from, we got a problem, thank you, you know.
Okay. Well, can you clear up why, if it's a 4-year document, we have K through 5 on Maupin and Atkinson? Now, I know they're right now K through 5, but the plan that we approved had them at K through 8. So why aren't they listed as K through 8?
They're listed as K through 5 because today that building is a K-5 building. If we would, next year, if Maupin, and here, let me run the scenario. Let's say that the board working group, along with the management, along with the recommendations of the local planning committee, decide that we need to build a new building, or we need to change and do different renovations to an existing building because we want to use it in a different way. We would have to go back and amend this document and add those changes to it. And it's a pretty simple process. If we did that next year and Maupin was K6 and Atkinson was K6 at that time, we would also at that time, to make sure everything was current, amend those as well as any other changes. Perhaps maybe at another school, the roof starts going bad and we don't have the roof on here, we would then add that as well. And if you recall, I believe it was Fern Creek High School, we had to reopen the last plan 2 years in and add some work at Fern Creek High School to it. So it is amendable, it's just a current snapshot. To that point, something that we did find yesterday, and this we can change without getting KDE approval even though they've seen it, as we were filling out our list of schools, Shawnee Middle School wasn't a middle school 4 years ago, and as we were working through our template, it did not get added. We're going to add Shawnee Middle School and the 5th day count number of, I believe, 152 students on the 5th day count to this document. However, again, that's simply a listing of our schools for KDE. It's not anything that they use to determine any kind of funding from that list of enrollments.
Any other questions or concerns? Member Porter.
I understand that this is a document that is required by the state. I think it is every 4 years. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And I understand that we send it every 4 years with many times not many things happening that's on the document. I have some concerns. You answered one about Shawnee Middle School not being listed on the document. But as it pertains to facilities in the Jefferson County Public School District, there are major inequities. This document is not dealing with that, and I understand there are only so many things that can go on the document. But when you ask me to approve an elementary school at an undetermined location, and we don't know where that is, I have a problem with that because I think I need a better answer than that. And if you don't know where it is, okay, but I know we know the amounts of dollars that it's going to take for some of our schools. I have schools that have no heat or air in the gym, but that's not on here anywhere. I have a school that for 5 days this year when school opened had no air conditioning. That's not on here either. What we're going to do is we're going to start the HVAC process. As it pertains to what we must do in District 1 and other districts is if we need to find the money, then I would like to have the conversation about that, because the presentation that you have given us so eloquently says that for 30 years we have gotten to where we are. The presentation I have not heard is what are we going to do right now? I do not think that our schools deserve to wait another 30 years and to sit here and say let's build another school when some of us have been beat up tremendously about building schools when we don't have our schools up to standard. I have a real problem with that, and maybe nobody else does. But for the people that represented me in my district, I have a real problem about it. This piece of paper is a formality. When I came to the board 6 years ago, there was an elementary school that was listed to get a media center. I took Dr. Hargens there to visit the school. They still don't have the media center. The principal has retired. They're on the list now, but they had been on the list for 10 years prior to me coming to the board. So something is wrong with the process, and if this is just a piece of paper that we send to Frankfurt, send it. I will not vote for it because I think that we are not addressing the needs in the Jefferson County Public Schools as it pertains to the inequities of the facilities, and until we face it, we will not fix it. So you don't need my vote, all you need are 4, but I am tired of voting for this when nothing is happening and things continue to fall apart in the schools. They do not have heat, they do not have air. They do not have lighting that is consistent with other buildings. When you came to us at Central High School for the meeting, and a student said, student's voice, Dr. Razor, how can I sell my building to folks when they come here to see the school? And one of the things is if we know we're going to do this every 4 years and we wait and have 3 required meetings the year that this is due, there's not a community voice around this at all. And I think the community needs to understand if we're ever going to get money as we talk about raising taxes or asking for additional taxes for facilities, we'll never get it with the 3 meetings when you don't have more than 25 people at a meeting. So I'm very concerned, and I will not continue to sit here and just say, okay, raise my hand, vote for it, and nothing happens. Something must happen with the inequities with the facilities in the Jefferson County Public School District. I'm speaking for District 1. That's why I was elected. I'm not fussing. I'm just trying to be as matter of fact as I can because I've been sitting here for 6 years and something needs to change.
Well, I'd like to address those things, please. First of all, the concerns that you bring up in your buildings, when it says HVAC, it would be the gymnasiums because today, in this day and age, when it's done, that would be the overhaul, that would be done. I have sat and stood before this board since providing the infrastructure assessment and shown you, and you can turn to the back of your infrastructure assessment, because in there somewhere I was asked a question, and I'm gonna answer it. For the better part of the last 16 years, the maintenance funding for this district was flatlined. So in the year 2000, it was $6 million provided to my department to maintain our buildings. In the year 2012, it was $6 million. In the year 2013, it was $4 million, 14, $4 million, 15, $4 million. Today, that amount should be well over $10 million. I cannot maintain buildings at an adequate level without adequate funding. Capital projects are funded at about half the level they need to be funded at. I cannot replace schools and renovate schools with the funding I have to keep up. I've stood in front of you twice and told you that. So I'm telling you we need the funding. However, what I don't want to do, Ms. Porter, is I don't want to say there's just a problem. And this is just Mike talking. I don't think you were told prior to me getting here that there was a problem. Here's a list, we have the need, please approve it, thank you. This document never will tell you what we are doing. It was designed for the typical Kentucky school district, a district that has 5 or 6 schools, that when you list all the needs of those 5 or 6 schools, there's a real good possibility in the next 4 years you're touching every one of those buildings. We have 155 locations. If we were touching 15 schools a year, that's over 10 years until we get around. We're touching about 5, and that's in a really good year. So I've stood in front of you too, and I've pointed out 2 things. You fix this problem in one of 3 ways. You increase the funding to meet the need. You decrease the need to meet the funding. Or you do some combination of the 2. The reason that I just didn't bring you this document, the reason that about a month ago I stood before you and presented recommendations of the LPC was because this document is not good enough. It does not meet our needs. The purpose of putting a board working group together around this, to your very point, Ms. Porter, is that we put a plan together. Media centers haven't been replaced because we haven't had the money to do so. Right now, we are being driven by 2 things. By need for seats, and that was the reason for building the new elementary school and for annexing Alex Kennedy Elementary School. and by HVAC systems. I've also set in front of you and I've told you we have 44 buildings that are end of life. End of life means beyond their useful life. Means at any time, just like happened at Jefferson Fellow High School yesterday in Indiana, the HVAC system could fail. Given current funding, we're looking well at about 9 to 10 years to get to all of those buildings, and there's about 28 waiting in the queue after that. Again, this isn't new information. I'm sitting in front of you telling you we've got to do something about it. Our kids deserve better. Our staff deserves better. And there's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made around this, and you're absolutely right. We've got to get the community involved. For KDE's sake, we had to complete this document. Our real work begins next week after this document, or 2 weeks from now after this document is improved, when we all put our heads together and our communities together and decide what we're going to do to fix this problem.
Member Horn?
You know, when I ran for this office, I didn't do it because I thought it would be easy. I didn't do it because I wanted to get the low-hanging fruit. I did it because I wanted to work on the big issues that were systemic that would affect our district. This is one, I've been a little bit of a squeaky wheel on this, but I'm really excited about not approving this plan, because I'm with Ms. Porter. I think I have not voted to approve it, or, you know, because it just doesn't reflect reality. It reflects a reality that in my district, we have very big overcrowding. I have over-limit schools, as you said. I have a school that should have 900 people in it, and it has, when I got here, was 1487 or something like that in the school. And so I also have media, you know, rooms that have been on the list for 10 years or more. The East End has 8 elementary schools and 3 middle schools and 2 high schools. We have very few schools relative to other districts, other of our divisions here. We do get lower per pupil, lower district spending. I think, Chris Cobb, yours is the lowest. Mine is the low next to you in spending relative to the other peers. So the bottom line is I'm concerned about the document showing what it shows, that it shows an enrollment and it shows a facility capacity that are very divergent. As Dr. Wilner picked out, 57% of our middle schools are over-enrolled. It shows this divergence, and one of my principals, Donna, and I had a very great meeting. We did, with the mayor of Douglas Hills and the principal of Crosby and our superintendent, Glenn Beatty, our assistant sup, and it was a very productive meeting. To again, our willingness isn't to just throw our hands up and complain like Ms. Porter. We are willing to try to. We need a plan. I'm not, you know, managing the district, so we're really excited about what you're proposing. But there's something in the middle. You called it optimal capacity. Mr. Kelly called it educational capacity. I just have this fear that sometimes these numbers in this document are used to justify student assignment decisions in my district. You know, basically the enrollment capacity of my schools, you know, and that's what concerns me. But if there's a plan on the horizon to get a plan together, I'm willing to dig in and work for it. So, you know, I just would like you to talk a little bit about what optimal capacity is relative to what we're asking to be approved today, which is enrollment and facility capacity.
Okay. First of all, this is not a student assignment document. It's not a plan of what we're going to do. It's a plan of need. And the reason, first thing I said to you all, and every time I've ever talked about this document, it's not a plan. I need to let you know if it's not approved, we can't do anything. Because these are the things that have to be approved for KDE to allow us to start the BG1 process or the BG process on any facility project. This is simply a list of the needs we have. Again, because I realized I didn't address it earlier, the new elementary school is not an additional elementary school. It's replacing a failing system that it would not be wise, and there is not a school picked out for that. It's if we would get to a school that is on our list of failing HVACs, and it is not advantageous to replace that school. However, we need that school, then we should look at that as a possibility. We couldn't even look at it as a possibility unless it was on the plan. And as I said earlier, we could go back and amend it. But this is not telling anybody that we're going to do any of these things. It's saying we have these needs, and what we're going to do is somewhere in this plan, in this document. But as far as the enrollment documents, KDE just wants to see that we have these schools, that the capacity to the outside, to the right, is the optimal capacity for a school. And that is we determined when we did the facilities assessment, the perfect number of kids that you could have in that building. And that perfect number can fluctuate anywhere from 85% of that number to the right to 115% of that number. And a school still be a conducive learning environment. When you get below 85%, it doesn't necessarily affect the learning environment, but it no longer makes sense to operate a building with so few occupants. It doesn't make good operational sense. When you have over 115% capacity in a school, you start running into logistical issues. It's hard to get lunch done. It's hard for kids to pass in the hallway. It's hard to manage behavior. It's hard to schedule gym classes or any other common space classes. So that's an issue. However, this is just a roll call of our optimal capacity number on the right and what our fifth day count in these programs were on the left. There are no student assignment decisions derived from this document. To my knowledge, student assignment never even looks at this document. We just simply request from our data department what was the fifth day count in all of these programs and plug that in.
Further discussion or questions? Member Porter?
I understand that the document has to go to Frankfurt. I'm not saying that, that the board does not have to vote on it. I'm saying that District 1 will not vote on it, and I want it noted why I'm not going to vote on it. This is another document that goes to Frankfurt. I understand that. But to continue to have a unanimous vote on this gives the appearance that it's okay.
Understood.
It's not okay. And I'm running out of time. The district is running out of time, and our kids deserve better, in my opinion.
They do.
I'm one of 7. So for the district I represent, my vote is no. All you need is 4 for this to go to Frankfurt.
Any other discussion? Okay. I will say that, well, my questions to you are one, I know you said within a couple of weeks that you're trying to reconvene or convene a committee to discuss getting a strategic plan for our infrastructure. When do you think that will come to this board?
I'm actually asking the board right now, in 2 weeks, for the board, similar to when we constituted the performance or technology and performance working groups, the finance working groups, and the deeper learning working group, I believe it was.
Strategy.
A strategy working group, that in 2 weeks, when this comes for final approval, the board also put together that committee at that time.
And Chair Brady, we had talked about at the next meeting during the work sessions to have that as board organization and to talk about committee formation.
And
so we were thinking that in 2 weeks you would be talking about possibly forming a facilities committee that would actually work on what are the projects that are going to be done. So I would emphasize that this is a list of facility needs that's a requirement to send to Frankfurt. The important work will be the facilities work group or committee that this board decides about, that will then say what's actually going to happen in the district. So I would just make those two distinctions. But that, per our discussion, is scheduled for our next meeting, is to spend the 2 hours that normally would be work sessions for the board to actually have that discussion.
Okay. Vice Chair Wellman?
Do we have, as one of the facilities needs, adequate centralized space for the ESL Newcomer Academy?
Yes, that was one of the recommendations of the local planning committee.
Okay.
Actually, it was recommendation number 1 of the local planning committee.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Cole.
I just want to reaffirm what Ms. Porter said. You know, I think we just need to recognize that while many, if not all of us, have, you know, pockets of poverty, of need in our districts, I think it's fair to say that Ms. Porter's district is in a lot greater need in many different ways. And I would encourage us as a board, and, you know, you as the person over this, to prioritize the needs of Ms. Porter's district. You know, we're a public school entity. We have to provide every kid with the same resources. Every kid needs to, as much as possible, go to a building that is equipped the same, looks the same. That's what we're tasked with. And, you know, the reality, I think, as we all recognize, is that we're not doing that right now. And I think that's what our priority needs to be as we look at facilities. And, you know, I think the points you raised about funding are absolutely things that we need to hear. And I hope that the board, as we, you know, approach questions about funding, takes those comments into consideration.
All right. Hearing no other, or seeing no other questions or comments, I'd like to have a motion to approve the draft district facilities plan and selection of hearing officer. Member Duncan so moves. Is there a second? I will second. All in favor?
It has to go.
We have 4. All those opposed? We have 3. Motion carries, and we will move on to our next item. Thank you. The next item is an informational item. It is regarding the Districts of Innovation Plan overview. Dr. Hargens, would you like to take a moment to introduce and discuss this item?
Absolutely. As people are coming up to the table, this is an information item. So what we're intending to do tonight is provide an overview. You all received a document. It was on e-meeting, but just to briefly talk about just an overview of our Districts of Innovation. And I'll start by giving some background. So Districts of Innovation was created by the passage of legislation in 2012. It allowed public school districts in Kentucky to apply to the State Board of Education to become a District of Innovation. And I would say the word innovate means to do something differently to get a different result. So what it provided districts was the opportunity to request waivers from regulations and statutes in an effort to improve learning. So the other thing a District of Innovation was able to do is participate in a collaborative network with other Districts of Innovation. So I'll remind you that in 2013, Jefferson County Public Schools was approved as a District of Innovation. So this draft plan under consideration, again, just an overview for information, is really phase 2 of the JCPS Innovation Plan. I'll remind you that the plan, the original plan and this plan, contains 4 broad strategies. The first one is access to highly effective instruction through collaboration. The second one is extending learning opportunities and experiences. The third is creating schools of innovation. Again, schools that do something different. And then 4th is creating a system of support so each student can be successful. So what you'll note is that phase 2 incorporates several new initiatives directly related to Vision 2020. So it's really a way that we can help have Vision 2020 become more realized. So what you're going to do is hear brief summaries of each of the 4 strategies. Chief academic, and lots of people were involved and are involved in parts of the plans, but they're going to give you the overview. So Chief Academic Officer Lisa Herring will discuss strategy 1, which is highly effective instruction through collaboration. Dr. Herring.
Thank you, Dr. Hargens. So Board Chair Brady, Dr. Hargens, and of course to the board, thank you for the opportunity for the overview. So staying in step with Dr. Hargens' introduction of the District of Innovation application, I'm excited to take the first part of unpacking, if you will, one of the components of strategy 1, innovative strategy number 1, and I would highlight for you 2 key words. The word will continuously be innovation, and in this level, I would also say collaboration. So there are 5 key components that I'd like to unpack, and the first is around the redesign of professional learning. In unpacking that throughout this application process, you will see what's been presented as a model for redesigning professional learning through a hybrid teacher model, where we work across the district with teachers in interdisciplinary areas where they have half days in the classroom and half days working with content area specialists. That's an excellent opportunity to bridge both classroom instruction and professional growth. That's one component of the redesign. JCPS Voice is another element that's a part of the component of the redesign. In JCPS Voice, we focus on the opportunity to innovate through virtual communication. So there are virtual learning communities, as well as an opportunity for us to interface with CTQ, and CTQ is the Center for Teacher Quality that's housed out of North Carolina, with what we call a teacherpreneur, or teacherpreneurship, where our teachers are then a part of a virtual learning community to interface with teachers across the district, and they're also a part of the design of this opportunity to connect. Another innovative approach. In addition to that, there is JCPS Forward. JCPS Forward highlights another opportunity for interaction across the district with our teachers, with other teachers around professional development, whether that's through the format of Ed Camp, which was held this past year at Wagner High School, where teachers were able to come together through a camp model, if you will, but really focusing on professional learning, providing them an opportunity to engage with each other and plan accordingly around strategies and professional growth. We've always maintained our conversation around supporting priority schools, so the 4th component to that is Priority Teacher Institutes. This past summer, we held a 2-day Priority Teacher Institute, and the feedback was robust. It was exciting for teachers because it provided something that doesn't always occur, and that something is a chance to have uninterrupted time to plan, to engage, to discuss best practices and opportunities for growth for our teachers specifically in our priority schools. And then 5th, our focus on diversity and equity. Our DEP department has, along with this application process, worked with us to ensure that we have diversity and equity as it relates to teacher initiatives. And there are 2 key components that I will unpack in that with diversity and equity. One is our CARDS program, the continuation of that, where our teachers in our priority schools have the opportunity to participate in graduate studies as well as diversity literacy certification. Again, CARDS being competency, awareness, and responsiveness for diverse students, a critical part of this. So again, in unpacking, because this is an overview, the components for our professional learning piece, we have the redesign for professional learning, JCP Voice, JCP Forward, our Professional Teacher Institute, and our diversity and equity professional learning opportunities as well.
Thank you, Dr. Herring. So that's number 1, highly effective instruction through collaboration. Number 2, or the second pillar, is extending learning opportunities or experiences. And when I look at this pillar, the technology working group that the board had, what you'll see is lots of things that were born in the technology working group. So Sharis Lattimore is the Director of Computer Ed Support. Will talk about strategy 2.
Strategy 2 is extending learning opportunities so students may learn anywhere, anytime they have access to instructional materials. Phase 1 of the strategy focused on leveraging technology in remote classrooms throughout the district and globally. But based on a review of trends and changes in instructional technology, Phase 2 focuses on expanding innovations in a number of ways. The first is through research and development of successful instructional practices using technology. The Computer Education Support Department will test the new instructional technologies and research best practices for instructional technology implementation. Computer Ed will also serve as the innovative hub, share research-based effective instructional technologies with educators, and also engage in rigorous continuous education to support that technology infrastructure for changing the way that we teach. The second strategy will be, it will address strategy 2 by using a mobile technology classroom in which we'll take our show on the road. So we'll do this by utilizing a mobile bus that we'll take to different schools so that we can give all students an opportunity to experience STEAM technology. We'll also collaborate with the Career and Tech Ed department so the students will have a real-world experience in helping us to design, develop, and configure the mobile classroom. We'll also have a district-wide makerspace, and this will serve as a training ground for schools to establish their own makerspaces, and it'll serve as the showroom for teacher training and student field trips. It will include rotating stations like Lego and Vex Robotics, green screen technology, digital music, problem solving, critical thinking skills, collaboration, and virtual reality. And long term, we'll transition that makerspace from an adult-led makerspace to a student-led makerspace, where after students actually learn the different stations in the makerspace, then they'll serve as the trainers for those who will visit it. We will also connect JCPS students to global competitions, and we'll use the train-the-trainer model to equip teachers and sponsors for success in technology competitions. In addition to that, we want to ensure that students who successfully compete at the local and regional level are appropriately trained so that they can compete in robotics on the global stage. Lastly, we have worked with the DEP department with their set of innovative and engaging activities and learning opportunities that occur outside of the school day. And we'll work to support them with their Renaissance program, which combines classic literature with modern music. And we see a place where we can introduce students to digital music so that they can actually do the creating as opposed to putting music behind their already classical literature. They also have a program called Coding At, and they do coding at different locations. So we are well equipped to help them with coding and programming and introducing students to those concepts. And finally, they have another program that engages students with literature. So we'll do some things creatively with those with technology, like using the green screen technology and virtual reality.
Okay, so the second one is about extending learning and opportunities for students. So thank you, Dr. Lattimore. The third one is schools of innovation, schools that do things differently for different results. So Dr. Hartstern and Ms. Rogers, our Director of College and Career Readiness, will talk about 2 examples.
Good evening. During phase 1, a community-based conversation resulted in 2 elementary schools as schools of innovation. Both Maupin and Atkinson launched their winning proposals during the 15-16 school year. They'll continue that work under phase 2, but we have new models for innovative schools. The first would be a middle school design on the Stewart campus, which I'll talk about briefly, and then the Ford NGL High School Talent Academy model with Doss High School as an early adopter. For the middle school redesign, we had a unique opportunity to reinvent the physical space of the Stewart campus. And so we had an existing 6th grade academy, and then we had Stewart's middle school. We blended those two schools to have a 6th grade academy for Frost, which already existed, and then have Stewart's 7th and 8th grade academy. 2 schools, 2 separate identities on one campus. This included reviewing and looking and studying the research and for turnaround efforts, and so there was 4 components that were identified that really needed to occur in this plan. The first would be student supports, both cognitive and non-cognitive. Teacher supports, understanding that teachers would need additional supports. Most of them are new to the career at Frost and at Stewart. We also looked at leadership support and making sure that we understood the exceptional needs that are needed for leadership in these high-need schools. And then the last piece is the systems alignment or systems thinking. And that was really taking the work and the design model and adhering to the advanced ed standards for continuous school improvement. In addition, there were additional resources, additional allocation, additional staffing to make sure that we could support each of these design elements. And then a project coordinator or manager was selected to ensure the smooth transition for the plan. I'm only talking briefly, but I want to end with this. I would be remiss if I didn't note the exceptional collaboration between the 2 sites. The leadership, the school leadership, the schools. One small example, which really isn't small, but I'd like to share, is that Frost had a one-to-one technology component with Chromebooks. Stewart adopted that. They're almost there. There are about 570 students have access to technology. It's exceptional to be in those classrooms and see the interaction and the use of technology and the tools and resources to advance student learning. But what's really fabulous is that the Frost staff already had experience with this, and they adopted their colleagues on the Stewart side and really worked together to ensure that that initiative would take off. That's just one small example for the collaboration that's existing between those 2 schools.
The Talent Development Academy model is an opportunity for high schools to expand career pathways, options, and opportunities so we can have different results in 2021 so these students graduate prepared, inspired, and empowered just like we set forth. The key components of the Talent Academies require schools to organize schools within schools, small learning communities where meaningful adults are supporting these students for a 3-year span, and that they graduate with college credits, a post-secondary plan, they've job shadowed, early work experience, and industry credentials. So it's heavy business and industry partnership. One of the key components of this is a strong freshman academy, so all students will transition into high school and transition out of their freshman academy ready to go into a career academy model. We'll deep dive in a few weeks at a work session, but this is a quick overview about talent academies.
Okay, so you've got professional or learning through collaboration. You've got extended learning opportunities and experiences for students. You've got schools of innovation doing things differently. But in order for our students to be successful in that cradle to career pipeline, there has to be support, a system of support around them. So Mr. Lowe is going to talk about the 4th pillar, which is the system of support.
Right. With phase 1 of the Districts of Innovation, you'll recall that we implemented Louisville Linked, which is a mechanism by which school-based folks can link students to services that are provided outside of the district. We're looking at a greater collaboration with city and community partners to really strengthen and deepen that. Through using the Cradle to Career framework. As was mentioned earlier tonight, Dr. Wilner is going to be representing the board on the Cradle to Career Cabinet, and Dr. Hargens is also a member, as well as Dr. Herring, to make sure that there's good representation from JCPS. But that represents the whole P20 spectrum of education from pre-K all the way to successful entry into the workforce. That framework is going to be the basis for the development of a collective decision-making structure where those groups of people are going to be talking to one another about all of the resources within the community and how they can best be deployed to support children. We all know that there are barriers to learning that students have based on their experiences due to poverty and other circumstances in their lives, and it's a community-wide requirement that we address those things so that they can be successful in the classroom. We're truly fortunate to also be connected to a project called the By All Means Project through the Harvard Graduate School of Education, which is bringing together 6 cities and school districts in partnership to look specifically at the direct linkage between the impacts of poverty and student achievement and how you can address those with using research-based practices and kind of learning between the group. Research and dissemination, policy and advocacy, field work, and a set of national meetings that allow us to talk to other people who are addressing the same sets of issues. So we're using the Cradle to Career framework as a mechanism to move forward with our, and informed by the Harvard By All Means, to move forward with the Say Yes to Education model, which has been discussed previously at the board, which essentially has 3 main parts, and this is kind of the critical thing about bringing collective governance together. The first is to create a post-secondary scholarship structure through a locally funded endowment that will provide support for every public school graduate to be able to afford a college education. The second one is comprehensive wraparound supports from pre-K all the way through high school graduation and into college to make sure that not only do students are graduate, but they graduate prepared for success in post-secondary world, whether it's work or in the post-secondary model. And then third is that collective governance structure where the critical decision makers in the community will come together and make hard decisions about how resources should be allocated most effectively so that we're making sure that we're not duplicating efforts or missing a gap in services that are needed. It's really exciting and I think a really game changer potentially. I want to emphasize that the Say Yes to Education model, and we'll be talking about it in a another board meeting soon to make sure that that we want to move forward with this. The board had actually adopted that as something to say yes to. We want to make sure that the reconfigured board is also fully up to speed on the process and behind that work. But essentially, it's the fundamental basis is about using data to drive decision making, and it's data on a collective level, on sort of having benchmarks, citywide benchmarks on at each level of the P12 system to make sure that we're meeting targets and allocating resources appropriately. And then on the student level, a really robust opportunity to have a student profile about are they on target, are they heading in the right direction, or are there things or issues or problems that need to be addressed. In my mind, it's sort of Louisville linked on steroids. It's a really powerful mechanism. The Say Yes folks bring technical assistance to help build that infrastructure, and that's where we are. The other interesting thing is that we're in conversation with Say Yes, and they haven't kind of pulled the trigger and said, you're the next Say Yes city. Leadership around the table has come to a consensus that regardless of the outcome of that, this is worthy of our pursuing it as a community, finding resources in other places.
So Mr. Lowe talked about that last pillar, which is the system of support. So if I could put the Vision 2020, I see Vision 2020, maybe I'll put it on a stick, right? And I want to say, I see Vision 2020, because we really don't have different plans. We have one plan, Vision 2020. And what we've done is woven the things that we're doing that align with Vision 2020 to take advantage of being a district of innovation. So to get the flexibility that being a district of innovation could potentially get for us. So again, this is a high-level overview. We're not asking for approval, so we will ask for approval at the next meeting.
Okay. Questions or comments? Anyone? Okay. Hearing no questions or comments, I'd like to take a motion to receive the information items. Is there a motion? Member Porter motions. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Kolb seconds. All in favor? All opposed? And we have one absence. So motion passes. All right, next item is our consent calendar. And I will mention right now that in the future, I do plan to take breaks at some point to where we can stand up at least and stretch. And this won't be a butt-numb-a-thon. But it's an actual festival and film festival, actually, but it seems like we're adopting that here. But I do want to go ahead and move on to the consent calendar. Are there any items to be pulled down from the consent calendar? Dr. Wilner, what items would you like to pull down from?
Q, and I don't need to vote separately. I just want to briefly highlight it and introduce someone in the audience.
Q, which we will discuss. And are there any other folks that want to pull down a consent calendar item? Member Duncan.
Just like, just not that it's anything that I need a separate vote on, but just some clarification.
Okay, so quick clarification and a quick comment on items O and Q. Anyone else? Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to give us the opportunity to have a quick comment regarding item O, which is approval of agreements. And Member Duncan, I believe you had a question or wanted to ask for clarity on something.
Yes, I just I had asked Dr. Hargens last night if we had any examples of how this cooperative purchasing agreement could benefit us and just kind of get an idea of some of the things that we would be saving money on and what that savings would look like. I was just curious.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate the types of examples that I gave in the superintendent's report. When you combine copier paper, solid waste disposal service, recycling, library supplies, playground equipment, scoreboards, cafeteria furniture, so it would be any kinds of those things that we could link together with Fayette County and just get a lower price because we're buying more.
Okay.
Is that all?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to move on to a quick comment regarding item Q. Vice Chair Wellner.
Yes, this is the name change for more traditional, removing the traditional and making it the Marion C. Moore School. And I just want to point out that the fabulous principal, Robert Folk, is here with one of his middle school teachers, Ms. McLean, and just want to call out the positive forward momentum happening at Moore, how hard this administrator has worked to empower students, to elevate student voice, to empower teachers and staff, and just to introduce him to you all and just express my support for the name change.
Very well. Since that was all the items regarding the consent calendar, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar. Do I see a motion to approve? Member Duncan makes the motion. Is there a second? Member Horn seconds. All in favor? All opposed? There's no one opposed. There is one absence. Motion passes. And now we're going to move on to our next item, which is the board planning calendar. I will begin by saying on the board planning calendar, as Dr. Hargens has mentioned, it is my intent to have at our next board meeting a work session to discuss the organization of the board. These items would include things such as committees that were mentioned earlier. What I would like to know is, items as far as what our budget is for board development regarding, for example, NSBA participation at their annual conferences. What's the process for that? I'm unclear on that. It just seems to be kind of dealt with ad hoc in the past. I'd like some clarification on that, and it's something that I think all board members would like some clarification on that. Things such as the retreat and even things such as mundane as the sitting arrangement here, which we're just kind of keeping our seats as is. So that's the idea for the work session at our next board meeting. So I wasn't sure we were discussing that, because you had mentioned 2 hours for that, which I think we'd be fine with. But if there was another item, what I would suggest is that we move that item up to the front, because I know Member Gies has obligations for his position, so I want to be able to provide as much time for his participation as possible.
Well, and what we discussed is moving the work session on dual credit and a magnet steering committee progress to another meeting, which would allow you to start even a half an hour later, so that you would have an hour and a half that was all about board organization. And I'll remind the board also that you need to set times for meetings, because we only set the times for meetings through March. Yeah. So I'll just remind the board that we would love for you to talk about that as well.
Very well. All right. Are there any other items that anyone wants to discuss regarding the board planning calendar?
I didn't see.
We'll also Member Duncan and then Member Horn.
I didn't see this on there, and it might be, I may have just have missed it, but at some point that recommendation from whatever group we're having to work on administrative salaries, that should be coming to us in May, it looks like. I mean, if we're going to separate administrative salaries, it looks like it has to be by May. We need that information so that we can have the discussions about negotiations. So anyway, May.
Very well. Ms. Gilpin, are you capturing this data for us to discuss regarding on-deck issues? Great, thank you. Member Horn?
I know that there's a policy related to committees and community advisory committees. And so, you know, I know that there's discussion about doing work groups. I don't know that we have really a policy what that is. So I feel just personally more comfortable working within our policies. If we wanted to add something and develop a whole scheme about work groups. But it seems like we need to, you know, hopefully we can channel our thinking and all of us look and see what kind of community advisory. There's some really great, it's really like a work group, but it's more, you know, there are some things that, you know, it's authorized by the board and, you know, the members are known and approved. So there's like some interesting things that relate to that. It seems like it really is a good fit for some of the things that we are doing with the community. So I'm interested in the next meeting, you know, if we're going to talk for this, you know, couple hours, looking at, you know, kind of, you know, if we want to form groups for next year, but also look at maybe there are some groups that could use this umbrella instead of just being, you know, we want the community members not to be hanging out there. We want them to be supported and know that they have the board's full, you know, faith behind them. So you know, our magnet school group is one. You know, there's some others with the, you know, this great Christy Rogers is leading this tremendous group of volunteers, but we just want to make sure they know they're supported. And that may actually fit within the community advisory group. So that's one thing that I think I'd like to make sure that we discuss. And then also, Linda, I would also be very interested in that HR, you know, update. I think, you know, Tom, I mean, you know, when would be appropriate, you know, for, you know, an update on the, you know, hiring, you know, the plan and all that, maybe, you know.
We can give you a comprehensive strategy, and that would, I would assume, would take place in a working group, and that would be sometime in February, given the other things that are in front of that.
Yeah, so that if we can put that maybe as a suggestion on the calendar, and then next time when we vote to approve it, you know, we can decide if it wants to come off or not. Those are really the two things I think. I would also like to get on the calendar the Du Bois School. I'm very interested in seeing the progress and learning about that status, so I'd love to have that on the calendar. I have particular questions about it that I want to make sure are registered with the consultant. early in the process so that there isn't any, and I'm sure, there could be other, board members have questions, so we want to make sure that we talk to the consultants and have some interaction. I'm not sure it fits in what way it fits, into this. So maybe that group could tell us how it fits, how we can get feedback, because, it's not like, they have been at work very long, but just to have some kind of dialogue with that so we understand.
Okay. Vice Chair Wellner.
As I've said many times, I continue to be gravely concerned about our stratospheric suspension numbers. And I know we have a contract in place with IIRP. I would like very much to have an update. What are we doing? What's the plan? What can we expect to see? How will we know if the plan is working? There's just enormous urgency around this as we're suspending at just, again, stratospheric levels.
Member Porter?
I just have a comment about the Du Bois Academy. Since we do have a consultant in place, I think it's appropriate that we have updates to the board, but I also think it's appropriate for the consultant to meet with board members if they have individual concerns to do her work. Typically, when we have a consultant, they do not come back and do their work here at the table like we did tonight. So in fairness to the process of what we've done for others, I would ask that this consultant be given the same consideration and make herself available, and we make ourselves available to meet with her if there are specific things that we want to talk about. And we can certainly get it on the planning calendar, but let's be consistent with how we treat all of our consultants. We do not typically bring them to the table and quiz them along the way. And I think that it's her responsibility to meet with us if we have questions and get those questions answered, and to give periodic updates also. I just want to be fair and consistent.
Okay. Anyone else? Member Wellner, or Vice Chair Wellner?
I would just like to say, with regard to IIRP, I would actually like for us to hear directly from that consultant as well.
Member Horn.
In addition to the discussion, I just want to make sure I discuss today, because at the next board meeting, in that organizing meeting, I'm hopeful. We have tried in the past in these organizing meetings to have a policy committee that is sitting, and because like right now today we approved the 2015 policies. They were not brought to us before that. We anticipated that we would be getting policies generated month to month, in our board meetings. Instead, we didn't. So I would hope that in looking at the different committees, again, as opposed to like community advisory groups, that there might be like a sitting policy committee. We could look at, whether, again, it all depends on board member interest and time, whether any of these actually come to fruition. But I think that, kind of the side of the coin is to look at the deeper learning and make sure that that is, proceeding. And the other side of that coin is the discipline and the restorative practices. I'm very interested in seeing, that double-sided coin with academics and the restorative practice and discipline get worked. And then the same thing kind of goes for the finance. If there was a finance committee or community advisory group, it would be excellent that, the double-sided coin is the facilities and, the student population versus like where, the finances and the salary study and all that. So I think that some are ripe, and I hope we can be creative to see that some might be best handled in a community advisory. Some might be best, like policies, handled in a committee structure where there's a monthly meeting and, something like that. So just a suggestion for that meeting at the next meeting.
All right. Anyone else? All right. We need an approval to approve our planning calendar. Is there a motion to approve? Sorry? Set time limits? Yeah, that will be discussed during our next meeting. All right, I'm sorry. There was a motion made by Vice Chair Wilner. Is there a second? It is made by Member Duncan. All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Moving on. We can now come to board reports. Does anyone have any board reports? Vice Chair Wilner.
So my board report is in writing, and so it's there. In terms of representing the board on the Cradle to Career Cabinet, I'll be submitting in writing anytime there's a meeting. I think it's just really important for the board to understand that we're working toward a shared governance with a variety of other organizations, and so I really do want to represent the full board and not just my perspective. So as anything appears on my report that you have questions or concerns about, you know where to find me, or happy to discuss it in the context of a meeting.
Any other reports? Member Porter.
Just quickly, I'd like to recognize the fact that, this is a fact, not a report, that Monday we're celebrating the Dr. Martin Luther King holiday, and I looked up 2 quotes to think about how we can focus our work, or I can focus my work, which you've obviously heard from me tonight. But one of the quotes is, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. I will not be silent about the things that matter. JCPS matters to me. My district matters to me. I will not be silent. And the other quote is, the time is always right to do right. The time is always right to do right. That's my report.
Thank you, Member Porter. Anyone else? I will quickly add for a moment that I want to thank the superintendent, Jonathan Lowe, Dr. Kolb, as for coming up to Frankfurt, as well as Jeff Busick, who is our consultant with arranging meetings. We had the opportunity to meet with three of the representatives up there, actually 2 representatives and 1 senator. We met with Senator Dan Syme, who is in Senate leadership and is also obviously from the Louisville area and is part of the Jefferson County contingency, I guess. That's probably not the right wording for it. Delegation, thank you. I was having a moment. As well as we met with Representative Phil Moffitt, and we met with our the new Education House Chair, Bam Carney. So I just want to take a moment just to thank all 3 of those legislators for their time in meeting with us, and especially Bam Carney, and the fact that he took even extra time to discuss items with us. And that was a very beneficial and I think productive conversation. So I just want to take a moment of that, and also thank my colleagues and Dr. Hargens for taking the time to make the trip to Frankfurt on a day when it was snowing and we weren't sure how we were going to get back. So I do appreciate that. All right. So since there's nothing else, and we've already had our speakers address the board.
You have the legislative position.
Yes, I'm coming to it. So now we have to come back to our tabled item, which is our legislative agenda item. And
I just completed it.
Okay.
If you take a 5-minute break, I can print it upstairs and bring it back down.
So why don't we do that? We'll take a 5-minute break and we'll come back. So motion to take a 5-minute break. All right, second. That was from Member Horner, second of Dr. Gee, or Member Geese. All in favor? And I'm going to say that's unanimous. Okay.
You're right. I know. I don't know why I put my thing away. Thank you. It was done. We're not done. I thought we were done. I forgot about that. Thank you.
We got 5 minutes. We got 5 minutes. I don't think I can sit. I'm glad that Mike's going back over there because the rest of them. And see, I was wondering about that. You're killing me, I swear.
Carol and Tandy went to Chicago tonight to be there. I sent her a text.
So now, as you referenced around First Lady, was at the American School Counselors Association.
I guess it was something they were at the White House, and she's had it every year.
The Counselor of the Year.
Yeah, and she named the Council of the Year for Summer Career Tech Center, and then she talked about the things that had happened under the administration and the college signing day. You said you have signing day for ball for athletes. So right. So. No yawning.
Oh, sorry. It's infectious, isn't it?
No yawning.
Was there Dr. Combs' business card sitting around here? I picked that up with Terry Robinson's. She sent me a text. She said, "Can I pick it up?" And she'll get it from me tomorrow. That's what I'm doing.
All right.
You should never be afraid.
Thank you.
That's an actual film Okay, I'd like to call us back to order. Jonathan is not listening. Okay, I take that back. Well, an extension on our break for a moment, and then we'll wait till Jonathan. And once Jonathan arrives, then we're back in order.
Probably locked himself in his office.
Oh, God. What on earth?
We're going to see all sorts of ways. Here we go. All right. All right, Jonathan has arrived. Therefore, the board is now in order.
Go, Jonathan. This isn't dedication to do.
Thank you. Okay, so as we're all these are being passed out, all board members and superintendent have a copy of this. I'm going to turn this back over to Jonathan for him to start us off with this, and then we'll move through it from there. So, whenever you're ready.
Okay. So my thought was just to walk through the changes and make sure that they conform with your wishes. The first one was to have sort of a opening sentence regarding support of the charter school, Annenberg Charter School Accountability Standards. So it says the Jefferson County Board of Education supports the Annenberg Charter School Accountability Standards, some of which are incorporated in this document for emphasis, and in addition to the other items shown below. Let me know if there's an issue with anything that I'm sharing. The next change was under the first bullet of authorizers, and the language is revised to say establish local democratically elected school boards as sole charter authorizers. The next is the bullet immediately below that is language from the Annenberg Charter School Accountability Standards. Remove the ability of a state charter authorizing commissions to overturn denials of a charter applications by local authorizers. Locally made decisions not to license a charter school should be honored. The third item, I actually, after thinking about it, moved to finance, so I'm going to skip that and then we'll come down to it when we get there. Under enrollment, there was extended language under the second bullet. So now it says prohibit the exclusion or expulsion of students due to intellectual and or physical and or emotional disabilities, limited English proficiency, and or level of student parent guardian engagement or any other characteristic. Under finance, there was a quotation mark that was missing under the first bullet that was added. Again, under finance, and this was
Jonathan, can I just ask, why is other public schools in quotes?
That was how it was being carried from the original language. I don't know. I mean, I could remove them.
Let's remove the quotes and change that. Is it okay if we change that so we can have consistent language to common public schools?
Okay. There's I'm happy to do that. I will say that there was a legal debate that will come out of this charter school legislation, I expect, about what is a common public school,
okay,
and whether a charter school is part of the common public school, and that has funding implications. And
okay, so you want to leave it as other public schools?
Yeah, just
okay,
because like
that's fine.
You're getting into a
sure
complicated piece of.
Fine. So let's just remove quotes.
Great.
Moving on.
Okay. The next one is the language that I'm suggesting to move from applicants to operate a charter school. It's the third bullet under finance. And this was what Alan Young was talking about, where he was trying to get to the point of relationships between nonprofit charter schools and for-profit partners. And the language that I'm carrying here was provided by JCTA, and it says charter schools shall be transparent and follow all public school sunshine laws. If a charter school contracts with third parties for management and other major functions, those third parties should be subject to all transparency requirements for the charter school. So that was the gist of that I think they were trying to get to.
All right, I hate to be picky, but add a period at the end of that.
Add a period. I will do that. The final bullet under finance on the first page was adjusted. So now it says, should a charter school student return to a public school, all public monies attached to said student should be returned on a prorated basis to the public school district. And then on second page under regulatory oversight, under the first bullet, simply added school-based decision-making as one of the areas against which charter schools should not be exempted. And then the last two bullets carrying the language that Mr. Geese suggested, charter schools shall not prohibit union membership, and then language that gets to the same thing but is somewhat different, which Mr. Brady suggested, charter school employees shall have the same rights as employees at, I'm going to say at other public schools just for
That's
consistencies, in the district in which the charter school is located.
I just had a point of correction here.
Sure.
When we're adding the SBDM councils to regulatory oversight, instead of school-based, the proper term is site-based, and we might want to add councils to the end of that, site-based decision-making councils.
It should be councils. In statute, it actually is school-based decision-making councils, and I'll confirm that. But
okay, thank you.
Yeah, but your councils is yeah. Thank you.
Can I just make one point real quick? Bullet number 2 under accountability.
Yep.
I think there's a typo there where it says expulsion and discipline. I think it has the and sign, so,
yep.
And there's no space. So we can just change that.
I will correct that.
Thank you. Member Horn.
Just the first sentences. It just seems like you could just condense those two and just say, if the General Assembly acts to implement charter schools in Kentucky, JCPS believes that legislation should incorporate the Annenberg, charter school accountability standards, some of which are incorporated in this document for emphasis in addition to the items below. You know what I mean? So you just condense the whole thing.
Yep.
Any question about that? All right, let's do that. Anything else? Now, I do know we're going to take a moment for discussion, but regarding this document, anything else before we move on? Okay, so I'm sorry.
I think
Member
we've
Duncan.
come up with the perfect description of public schools.
Round of applause for that one.
All right. There is a request for discussion on this, so I'd like to turn this over to Member Porter to start us off. I'm sorry, did you, at one point you said you wanted to you wanted to have a moment to discuss this?
My question was for Jonathan to explain to us, after we have established this document, what will happen next in Frankfort with us being one school district. Will every school district have something that looks like this, and will other organizations have something that looks like this? What is the process? That was the only thing I wanted was some clarification on. Thank you for helping me remember what I asked.
So a couple of things. First, there are a number of other organizations who have adopted positions on charter schools, and we've talked about them: KSBA, KASA, KASS, JCTA. I've not seen anything from KEA. They may have something, and then the State Board of Education. So those organizations do have position statements. They represent, other school districts, and so some of that language is being brought up, I think, from those other districts. We are participants in a group that's called 3KT, and it's sort of the 3K the 3 K groups, right? KSBA, KASS, and KASA, and then other people who are interested. That group gets together on a regular basis to have conversations of sort of common positions on legislation that we can bring forward to legislators. And so I will share this with them, and that will be part of the conversation. That set of groups will have, you know, common language that's coming forward. The other thing is that we have extended an invitation. He actually sort of invited himself, which was amazing or wonderful, but the new House Education Committee chair, we're hoping to get him into JCPS schools in January, and we will be certain to have conversations with him, and you know, he's thinking about what potential changes he might want to bring to charter schools. And then finally, McCarthy Strategic Solutions is our lobbying firm in Frankfurt. They are probably the best of the best, and are very well situated to bring forward our positions on things to the appropriate people at the appropriate times to make sure that they're having those conversations.
So my other question is, after we've done all this work and we send it there, what do they have to take any of the recommendations of the language that we give them, or are they capable of just giving it back to us the way they want us to have it?
Oh, my expectation is that you know, there are several of these that they will take into account and potentially incorporate, and several which they're likely not to.
Okay.
And that's just the nature of the.
I just think it's helpful to be clear, because, you know, some people will see this document and think that we will be able to accomplish this, and I think we should just, you know, be transparent and truthful. Thank you.
I'd like to echo that sentiment in that you know, this is seen as a compromise document, that this is something that we're putting out to the General Assembly as things that we would like to see, in hopes that we are invited to the table to make an informed, educated, rational decision.
Chair Warner, or Vice Chair Warner?
I just, and Jonathan, I guess I'm asking you, is there anything in this document that you think is going to make us, you know, is going to be so offensive or so over the top or so antithetical to what the legislators are putting forth that they're going to say, well, heck with them, they're not reasonable, they're not compromising?
Given, to be frank, given the new leadership position, I think that there are some things here that are simply off the table. You're stating your position, and I think that there's, you know, that's a legitimate process, but my expectation is that this stuff relating to unions is not likely to see the light of day in legislation, and there are a number of other, you know, those kinds of things. Sometimes you know, it's a matter of emphasis when you're having a conversation with a legislator. You know, your goal is to sort of maximize your ability to influence what the legislation looks like, and you seek your opportunities, and then perhaps spend less time on the things that are not going to be fruitful.
Member Horn?
Your choice of how you organized the bullet points appeared to be potentially alphabetical. Is that right? So is there, I know in the past we have set out, you know, things in different ways. Sometimes we, you know, had, you know, I think since I've been here, we had 4 top things that we picked out, and then we had everything else. So we had like a front page, and then we had like a back page. And so the first time I got on the board, it was more like this, like just kind of an alphabetical like laundry list. And so it seemed to be, that would be the only thing I would suggest. If we could, it might be smart to just like, I mean, this, you know, we're organizing it alphabetical, which was really great for us in coming up with it, but we don't necessarily have to stick with like this alphabetical organization and lack a priority among any of these issues. Do you know what I mean?
Well, let me tell you why it's organized this way, which is just ease of use for legislators. My expectation is there are going to be 2 or 3 points in play, and authorizers is going to be one of them, and some components of finance. And so my thought, particularly if you have a sort of a longish list, is that it's helpful to sort of say, if you're thinking about the authorizer question, look under this heading. And that really was the only reason, was just sort of an organizing principle, so people can find things. A long list tends to get challenging. In terms of prioritization, I understand your perspective. How we get to that from where we are right now, we'd have to think about how to approach it, I guess.
All right. Any further discussion? Member
Did
Duncan.
we already approve the legislative agenda other than this?
Mhm.
That's
That's correct.
already, and then we just set this aside to do this alone?
Yes.
All right.
Anything else? All right, so we're going to need a motion to approve this item. Is there a motion to approve this item?
Move to approve with the changes that we just.
Yes, that's the way.
And the copy editing changes that I'll make.
Yeah. So is there a motion?
Motion.
Member Gies, is there a second? Member Duncan, all those in favor? All opposed? And it's unanimous and motion passes. Now we come down to another item here, executive session. I'd like to make a motion that the board conduct an executive session for the purpose of conducting discussions that might lead to the dismissal of an individual employee as permitted by KRS 61.8101F. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
You're making the motion?
Yes. Well, yes, I am making a motion. So I am making a motion. Is there a second? Member Horn, is all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed? Any abstaining? Are you voting for or abstaining?
We just decided right this minute to have an executive session. Nobody, I mean, it's the first I've heard of it.
Yes, the chair can call for an executive session. So yes, I am calling. I rarely knew about executive sessions until I showed up or until it was announced to me. Okay, I can tell you, in years past, I did not know. So, motion passes. What is your vote? Okay, so motion passes. It's unanimous. We are going to adjourn for executive session. We are going to board conference room upstairs. Okay.